In order to take my girlfriend out for a nice dinner, I had to make some money, so that's why I started.
चाइना एग्जैक्टली क्या प्लान कर रहा है? पिछले कुछ सालों से अगर हम चाइना के एक्शंस को थोड़ा गौर से देखेंगे तो एक स्ट्रेंज पैटर्न दिखने लगता है। 2020 में भारत और चाइना के बीच गलवान वैली में एक वायलेंट क्लैश हुआ। उसके बाद धीरे धीरे भारत और चाइना दोनों ने पीछे हटना यानी डी एस्केलेशन शुरू किया, या एटलीस्ट हमें ये सोचने पर मजबूर कर दिया कि सब ठीक ठाक है। लेकिन क्या ये सच है?
यूजुअली चाइना के अराउंड 15,000 सोल्जर्स इंडो चाइना बॉर्डर पे रेडी रहते हैं और कुछ ही दिनों पहले चाइना ने ये नंबर 50,000 सोल्जर्स तक बढ़ा दिया। हिमालयन रीजन में सोल्जर्स को विंटर्स में रहने के लिए टेंट्स बन रहे हैं। भारत के अंदर आकर चाइना ने अरुणाचल प्रदेश में एक गांव बसा दिया है।
एग्जैक्टली चाइना क्या प्लान कर रहा है? आज यही सवाल हम आपके साथ डिस्कस करने वाले हैं। अगर आपको हमारे पॉइंट्स, हमारा रिसर्च अच्छा लगता है तो इसे और लोगों के साथ शेयर कीजिए।
भारत के लिए इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक्स को एक शॉर्ट और इंटरेस्टिंग वे में आपके सामने लाना हमारा मिशन है। हमें सपोर्ट करने के लिए हमारे यूट्यूब चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कीजिए और इस बेल आइकॉन को प्रेस कीजिए।
यूएस प्रेसिडेंट जॉन एडम्स ने कहा है, एक देश को गुलाम बनाने के दो तरीके होते हैं, एक ताकत से और दूसरा डेट से। आज चाइना दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा क्रेडिटर, जो देश, जो मीडिया हाउसेस डेल्टा वेरिएंट को इंडियन वेरिएंट कहने से डरते नहीं, इन्फ्लुएंजा को स्पेनिश फ्लू सरेआम कहते हैं, वो कोरोना वायरस को वुहान वायरस कभी नहीं कहते। चाइना की ताकत का एक पर्सपेक्टिव समझिए। वर्ल्ड बैंक, इंटरनेशनल मॉनेटरी फंड और ओईसीडी ने दुनिया में अलग अलग प्रोजेक्ट्स के लिए जो लोन दिए हैं, उन्हें कंबाइन भी किया जाए तो उनके लोन्स चाइना ने दिए हुए लोन से कम होंगे। इतने सारे लोन्स के साथ चाइना एग्जैक्टली क्या प्लान कर रहा है? लेकिन लोन देना तो अच्छी बात है, राइट? इससे डेवलपमेंट होती है, जॉब जनरेट होते हैं।
वेल, इट डिपेंड्स कि टर्म्स और कंडीशंस क्या है। इस वेबसाइट पर चाइना ने दुनिया के 24 छोटे बड़े देशों से किए हुए 100 कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स आप पढ़ सकते हैं। इसमें आपको कुछ काफी डिस्टर्बिंग फैक्ट्स दिखेंगे। 30% कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स में ऐसा कहा है कि बोरोइंग देश को एक स्पेशल अकाउंट मेंटेन करना होगा और वो किस बैंक में होना चाहिए ये चाइना डिसाइड करेगा। यहाँ बोरोइंग गवर्नमेंट्स को पैसे डिपॉजिट करने पड़ते हैं, एक मिनिमम बैलेंस मेंटेन करना पड़ता है। एज अ रिजल्ट पैसे शुरुआत से ही बोरोइंग कंट्री के बाहर रहते हैं।
प्लस ये कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स चाइना को पावर देती है किसी भी मोमेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट टर्मिनेट करने की और इमीडिएटली पेमेंट मांगने की, अगर बोरोइंग कंट्री में ऐसे कोई भी पॉलिसी चेंजेस होते हैं जो चाइना को एक्सेप्ट ना।
And as if this was not enough, चाइना के ये कॉन्ट्रैक्ट ज्यादा से ज्यादा कॉन्फिडेंशियल होते जा रहे हैं।
यहाँ तक कि कुछ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स में ऐसे भी लिखा हुआ है कि एक कॉन्ट्रैक्ट के डिटेल्स के साथ साथ उस कॉन्ट्रैक्ट का एग्जिस्टेंस भी पूरे वर्ल्ड के साथ साथ उस कंट्री के टैक्स पेयर से भी छुपा जाए, सीक्रेट रखा जाए। यानी ऐसी कई कंट्रीज हो सकती है कि जहां ऐसे कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स एग्जिस्ट करते हैं जिसके डिटेल्स उस देश के लोगों को भी पता नहीं। ऐसे कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स के साथ चाइना एग्जैक्टली क्या प्लान कर?
चाइना आज तक के सबसे एम्बिशियस प्रोजेक्ट में, बेल्ट एंड रोड इनिशिएटिव में $1 ट्रिलियन इन्वेस्ट कर रहा है, और वो भी काफी इंटरेस्टिंग तरीके से।
चाइना लोन देता तो है लेकिन एक कंडीशन पे कि कॉन्ट्रैक्ट चाइनीज अप्रूव्ड कंपनीज को ही मिले। चाइना से ये लेबरर्स उस प्रोजेक्ट पर काम करने के लिए उस देश पहुंचते हैं, यानी चाइना ने लोन दिया हुआ पैसा पेमेंट के रूप में चाइनीज लोगों की जेबें भरता है। अगर प्रोजेक्ट सक्सेसफुल हुआ तो चाइना का फायदा तो होता ही है, लेकिन अगर फेल भी हो गया तो चाइना का कोई नुकसान नहीं, क्योंकि फिर चाइना खुद ही वो प्रोजेक्ट कम दामों में खरीद लेता है। और बोरोइंग कंट्री के पास ऑप्शन ही क्या है? वो ये पैसा लेती है और फिर चाइना को ही लोन का एक छोटा सा हिस्सा वापस कर देती है। यानी चाइना को लोन पर इंटरेस्ट तो मिला ही साथ वो प्रोजेक्ट भी चाइना का हो गया। ये पूरा स्कैम कोई कहानी नहीं, एक सच्चाई।
श्रीलंका के हम्बनटोटा पोर्ट में कुछ ऐसा ही हुआ। आज उस पोर्ट का 80% हिस्सा चाइना ओन करता है, यानी फ्यूचर में अगर उन्हें उस पोर्ट पर एक नेवल बेस बनाना है तो चाइना ये कर सकता है।
पाकिस्तान में चाइना के सारे प्रोजेक्ट्स का मैप आप ही देखिए और इस कोइंसिडेंस की प्लानिंग को समझिए। इन सारे प्रोजेक्ट्स को हमारी बॉर्डर के इतने करीब देखकर पूछने का मन करता है, एग्जैक्टली चाइना क्या प्लान कर रहा है?
सिमिलर कोइंसिडेंसेस म्यांमार, नेपाल, बांग्लादेश, किर्गिस्तान, मालदीव्स, लाओस, कंबोडिया, मंगोलिया जैसे देशों में है जहां चाइना अपने प्रोजेक्ट से अपना पावर बढ़ा रहा है। और कोइंसिडेंसेस सिर्फ एशिया में ही नहीं, पूरे वर्ल्ड में है।
सिर्फ भारत के साथ नहीं, 17 देशों के साथ चाइना के बॉर्डर कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स हैं। चाइना में फ्रीडम ऑफ प्रेस नहीं है और ह्यूमन राइट्स वायलेशन कई सारे। और चाइना और वायरसेस की हिस्ट्री क्या है ये पूरी दुनिया को पता है, लेकिन फिर भी चाइना को क्रिटिसाइज कोई नहीं करता। इज इट बिकॉज चाइना जो भी करता है वो सब सही है, या फिर चाइना एक बुली है?
जरूरी नहीं कि चाइना अपने इस पोजीशन का गलत इस्तेमाल करे, लेकिन इस पोजीशन से चाइना को एक अनफेयर एडवांटेज जरूर मिलता है और इस एडवांटेज से चाइना कुछ भी कर सकता है।
पॉलिटिक्स में इंटरफियर कर सकता है, मीडिया को मैनिपुलेट कर सकता है और कॉलोनाइजेशन की एक नई वेव शुरू कर सकता है। सी, हमें बस ये समझने की जरूरत है कि ब्रिटिशर्स हमें रूल करने के लिए नहीं आए थे, वो बस बिजनेस करने के लिए आए थे। एक ऐसा बिजनेस जो हमें गरीब और उनको अमीर बनाकर छोड़ गया। ये पैटर्न हमें उस पैटर्न की याद दिलाता है।
चाइना कॉलोनाइजेशन को भूला नहीं है। चाइना एक जमाने में एक वाइब्रेंट और लीडिंग इकोनॉमी था, एंड दैट वाज बिफोर द ब्रिटिश डिस्ट्रॉयड चाइना बाय इंट्रोड्यूसिंग ओपियम। चाइना कॉल्स इट अ सेंचुरी ऑफ ह्यूमिलिएशन, और आज भी चाइना इस नेवर अगेन मेंटालिटी के साथ जीता है, और चाइना के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से ये ठीक भी है।
बट, एंड इट्स अ बिग बट, चाइना थिंक्स दैट दुनिया में सिर्फ दो तरह के लोग होते हैं, हैमर्स एंड नेल्स। हैमर्स जो डोमिनेट करते हैं और नेल्स जो डोमिनेट होते हैं। कल चाइना डोमिनेट हो रही थी, आज चाइना डोमिनेट कर रही है। ये एटीट्यूड रोल तो स्विच करता है लेकिन पैटर्न सेम रखता है, एंड वी फील दैट इट्स रॉन्ग। अगर आपको इस वीडियो से वैल्यू मिली, कुछ नया सीखने मिला, तो इसे शेयर कीजिए। देखिए, ये वीडियो चाइनीज लोगों के खिलाफ हेट फैलाने के लिए नहीं है, क्योंकि उससे हमें क्या फर्क पड़ता है। ये वीडियो बस हमारे लीडर्स को याद दिलाने के लिए कि चाइना का सबसे बड़ा वेपन डेवलपमेंट है, और अगर हमें चाइना को फेस करना है तो हमारे बॉर्डर्स को डेवलप करना होगा। नॉर्थ ईस्ट, लद्दाख, यहाँ तक अंडमान भी। और ये तभी होगा जब आप और हम जैसे कॉमन लोग गवर्नमेंट से डेवलपमेंट की मांग करेंगे। छोटी चीजों पर नहीं, सही चीजों पर फोकस करेंगे, क्योंकि चाइना के पास पैसा हो सकता है, पॉलिटिकल एडवांटेज हो सकता है, लेकिन हमारे पास फैक्ट्स की ताकत है, और यही सच आप तक पहुंचाने से मुझे फर्क पड़ता है। टीम, हम हमेशा सोचते थे कि मीडिया भारत के बारे में इतनी नेगेटिव थी, तो हमने एक पॉजिटिव सोल्यूशन बेस्ड अप्रोच अपनाया। अगर आपको ये वीडियो
1, 2, breathe, 3, 4, and I want to live with you. I want to ask, can we always stay together?
गोवा इज डाइंग। कुछ दिनों पहले गोवा में एक काफी स्ट्रेंज विजुअल देखने मिला। 3000 से ज्यादा लोग रात को एक रेलवे लाइन पर ऐसे उतर आए। लेकिन क्यों? गोवा में ऐसा क्या हो रहा है जो हमें पता ही नहीं।
गोवा के इकोलॉजिकली सेंसिटिव जोन में 3 ऐसे प्रोजेक्ट्स होने वाले हैं जिनसे 35,000 to 80,000 के बीच पेड़ काटे जाने वाले हैं।
अरे, कुछ पेड़ ही तो काटे जा रहे हैं। डेवलपमेंट के लिए ऐसे सैक्रिफाइसेस करने पड़े तो क्या फर्क पड़ता है? अगर आप भी ये सोचते हैं कि ये फाइट डेवलपमेंट और नेचर के बीच में, then this short video will change your mind।
क्योंकि ये सिर्फ एनवायरनमेंट के बारे में नहीं है, ये भारत के फ्यूचर के बारे में है।
और पहले ही बता देता हूं, अगर आप कौन सी पॉलिटिकल पार्टी पावर में ये देखकर क्या सही है और क्या गलत ये डिसाइड करने वाले हैं, देन स्किप दिस वीडियो, क्योंकि ये वीडियो आपके लिए नहीं है। लेकिन अगर आप सही को सही और गलत को गलत कहने में विश्वास रखते हैं, तो इस वीडियो को एंड तक जरूर देखिए और इसे अपने ओपन माइंडेड दोस्तों के साथ शेयर कीजिए।
बेसिकली इशू क्या है? गोवा में 3 डेवलपमेंट प्रोजेक्ट्स होने वाले हैं। गोवा से कर्नाटका के रेलवे रूट को डबल करने का प्रोजेक्ट, एक नेशनल हाईवे रोड वाइडनिंग प्रोजेक्ट, एक 400 किलोवाट पावर ट्रांसमिशन लाइन। गोवा का मौलम नेशनल पार्क और भगवान महावीर वाइल्ड लाइफ सेंचुरी आज खतरे में है।
अब हमारे कुछ सवाल है। नंबर 1, ये सारा डेवलपमेंट सिर्फ कोल से प्रॉफिट कमाने के लिए तो नहीं है। कुछ लोग मानते हैं कि ये सारे प्रोजेक्ट्स गोवा को एक कोल हब बनाने के लिए हो रहे हैं।
ऐसा कहते हैं कि इस एडिशनल रेलवे लाइन का यूज गोवा के मोरमुगांव पोर्ट में इंपोर्ट किए जाने वाले कोल को नॉर्थ कर्नाटका के स्टील और पावर प्लांट्स तक पहुंचाने के लिए यूज किया जाएगा। द गवर्नमेंट डिनाइज दिस क्लेम।
गोवा और कोल का एक डार्क रिलेशनशिप। प्राइवेट कंपनीज गोवा के पोर्ट से कोल इंपोर्ट करती है। 25 मिलियन टन्स ऑफ कोल। कितना? इतना। ये जो आप छोटा डॉट देख रहे हैं, वो एक इंसान है, वो एक वर्कर है। कोल इंपोर्ट का माउंटेन ऑलरेडी बढ़ा है, और आने वाले 10 सालों में एक इंसान है, वो एक वर्कर है। कोल इंपोर्ट का माउंटेन ऑलरेडी बढ़ा है, और आने वाले 10 सालों में ये एक फुटबॉल फील्ड जितना चौड़ा और 3 किलोमीटर ऊंचा होने वाला है।
जब ये कोल ट्रांसपोर्ट होता है बाय ट्रक, रेल और वाटर, उस पर एक ब्लू टारपॉलिन की शीट रखी जाती है। हवा आने से ये शीट मूव हो जाती है और सारा कोल डस्ट उस एरिया में डस्ट पोल्यूशन क्रिएट करता है।
इनफैक्ट गोवा के एक्स सीएम लेट मनोहर पारिकर सर ने इसी रेलवे डबलिंग प्रोजेक्ट को 2013 में रिजेक्ट किया था, एंड आई कोट, "We are not giving any permission to the double tracking. The proposal of increasing the tracks was mooted at the behest of few industries which want to transport coal from Mormugao Port Trust." अरे थोड़ा लॉन्ग टर्म के बारे में सोचिए। पूरा वर्ल्ड कोल को डिच कर रहा है और रिन्यूएबल्स के बारे में सोच रहा है, तो हम क्यों पीछे रह रहे हैं? हमारे ऑनरेबल मोदी जी ने भी पेरिस एग्रीमेंट में कहा है कि भारत ग्रीन हाउस एमिशंस कम करने में हेल्प करेगा, एंड सो फार वी आर डूइंग अ गुड जॉब। बट फ्यूचर में कोल से ब्रेकअप किए बगैर ये इम्पॉसिबल है। देन व्हाई फोकस ऑन कोल? नंबर 2, एनवायरमेंटल डैमेज। आपने इस वाटरफॉल का फोटो तो देखा होगा। ये है गोवा का दूध सागर वाटरफॉल, जो भगवान महावीर सेंचुरी की शान है। कैसा लगेगा अगर इसके आसपास की सारी ग्रीनरी को ऐसे हटा दिया जाए? लेट मी एक्सप्लेन द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ फॉरेस्ट फ्रैगमेंटेशन।
एक बड़े फॉरेस्ट को जब आप छोटे टुकड़ों में डिवाइड करते हैं, तब एजेस बढ़ जाते हैं। बहुत सारे स्पीशीज एजेस में नहीं, घने फॉरेस्ट में रहते हैं, तो और अंदर मूव करते हैं और इन फ्रैगमेंटेड एजेस में सर्वाइव नहीं कर पाते।
और इसका इंपैक्ट फॉरेस्ट के सारे एलिमेंट्स पर होता है। वेस्टर्न घाट्स एक हिमालय से भी ओल्ड इकोसिस्टम। ये एक 150 मिलियन ईयर ओल्ड बायोडाइवर्सिटी हॉटस्पॉट है जिसे इतने सारे स्पीशीज अपना घर मानते हैं।
ये 3 प्रोजेक्ट्स इस घर को 4 पार्ट्स में डिवाइड करते हैं।
इतने बड़े फॉरेस्ट में हर एक छोटी छोटी चीज एक दूसरे पर डिपेंडेंट होती है, एक इकोसिस्टम होती है, साथ में काम करती है। हमारे ह्यूमंस के इतने बड़े इंटरवेंशन की वजह से एक झटके में ये सारा फॉरेस्ट डिस्टर्ब हो जाता है। ऐसे एक डेवलपमेंट प्रोजेक्ट का एनवायरनमेंट पर क्या असर होने वाला है, ये जानने के लिए एनवायरनमेंट इंपैक्ट असेसमेंट का एक रिपोर्ट बनाया जाता है। कितने पेड़ कटने वाले हैं, इसका बायोडाइवर्सिटी पर क्या इंपैक्ट होगा और इसे कंट्रोल करने के लिए क्या क्या किया जाना चाहिए, ये सारी चीजें यहाँ मेंशन होती है। आज तक इन प्रोजेक्ट्स का ये रिपोर्ट पब्लिक नहीं है।
सेकेंडली, गोवा का पंचायत एक्ट उनके पंचायत को पावर्स देता है कि उनके एरिया में क्या कंस्ट्रक्शन होना चाहिए, ये वो डिसाइड कर सकते हैं। इन प्रोजेक्ट्स में इन सबसे अप्रूवल्स लिए ही नहीं गए हैं।
इन प्रोजेक्ट्स को क्लियरेंस लॉकडाउन के समय मिला तो कोई डिस्कशन हुआ ही नहीं है, एंड दैट्स रॉन्ग। एनवायरनमेंट को इतना ज्यादा डैमेज करने वाला प्रोजेक्ट जब होता है तब उसे कॉम्पेंसेट करने के लिए कुछ ना कुछ करना पड़ता है। रिफॉरेस्टेशन के लिए गोवा में इतनी बड़ी जगह है नहीं, तब उन्होंने कर्नाटका गवर्नमेंट से जगह मांगी। वाओ, यानी गोवा में डिफॉरेस्टेशन और कर्नाटका में रिफॉरेस्टेशन, ये कैसा लॉजिक है?
नंबर 3, कितने लोग अपनी जान देंगे?
क्या कोई अपनी लाइफ क्यों देखा है?
अभी नहीं, लेकिन थोड़ा लॉन्ग टर्म सोचते हैं।
गोवा के स्टेट गवर्नमेंट की इस रिपोर्ट ने खुद प्रेडिक्ट किया है कि गोवा का टेम्परेचर 2050 तक 2 डिग्री से बढ़ सकता है। अरे यार, 2 डिग्री से क्या फर्क पड़ता है, एसी लगा देंगे।
काश ये इतना सिंपल होता। गाडगिल कमेटी के इस रिपोर्ट ने पहले ही प्रेडिक्ट किया था कि फॉरेस्ट एरियाज में ह्यूमंस के अनसस्टेनेबल एक्टिविटीज की वजह से केरला में सिवियर फ्लड्स आ सकते हैं, और पिछले 2 सालों से वही तो हो रहा है।
और फ्लड्स का मतलब लॉस ऑफ लाइव्स एंड लाइवलीहुड।
इस रिपोर्ट ने पूरे वेस्टर्न घाट्स को और 6 स्टेट्स को कवर किया था, इंक्लूडिंग द इकोलॉजिकली फ्रैजाइल गोवा।
मानते हैं कि कोरोना वायरस एक बैट की वजह से ह्यूमंस में आया और उसने पूरी दुनिया में ये हैवक मचाया। वैसे ही इबोला जैसे डिजीजेस भी ह्यूमन और वाइल्ड एनिमल्स के इंटरेक्शन बढ़ने की वजह से आते हैं, और जितना ज्यादा हम वाइल्ड हैबिटेट में ऐसे इंक्रोच करते रहेंगे उतने ज्यादा ये इंटरेक्शंस बढ़ते रहेंगे और ये डिसीजेस भी बढ़ते रहेंगे। तो हम क्या कर सकते हैं?
गोवा के चीफ मिनिस्टर प्रमोद सावंत सर ने एक इंटरव्यू में ऐसे कहा था कि मेजरली उन्हें इन प्रोजेक्ट्स के लिए जो ऑपोजिशन आ रहा है वो भारत के बाहर से है। हमारे एनवायरमेंट मिनिस्टर प्रकाश जावड़ेकर सर ने ऐसे कहा था कि अगर उन्हें लोकल लोगों से एक मेमोरेंडम मिलती है तो वो इस बात पर एक्शन लेंगे। सो लेट्स गिव इट अ शॉट। हमारे बायो में लिंक को क्लिक कीजिए और हमारे एनवायरमेंट मिनिस्टर को अपने ऑब्जेक्शंस भेजिए। ट्रस्ट मी, 1 मिनट भी नहीं लगेगा।
मे बी उन्हें यह दिखाने की जरूरत है कि हमें भी हमारे एनवायरनमेंट से फर्क पड़ता है। लुक बॉस, बात सिंपल है। गोवा सिर्फ दारू और बीचेस नहीं है, उसका असली हेरिटेज उसका नेचर है, और ये नेचर आज भी अनएक्सप्लोर्ड है। अगर हम आज कुछ नहीं करते तो धीरे धीरे गोवा सिर्फ दारू, बीचेस और ड्रग्स ही बन जाएगा, एंड दैट विल बी अ रियल ट्रेजेडी। प्लीज, मेरी ये रिक्वेस्ट है, ये वीडियो ज्यादा से ज्यादा लोगों तक पहुंचाने में हमारी हेल्प कीजिए। शेयर दिस वीडियो विद योर फ्रेंड्स, टैग योर फेवरेट एक्टर्स, लीडर्स, इन्फ्लुएंसर्स, क्योंकि अगर हम गोवा में जाकर व्लॉग्स बना सकते हैं, उसकी नेचुरल ब्यूटी का लाइक्स के लिए यूज कर सकते हैं, तो उसी नेचुरल ब्यूटी को बचाने के लिए एक छोटी सी चीज भी कर सकते हैं। आई नो दैट 99% लोग ऐसे सीरियस वीडियोस एंड तक देखते भी नहीं, लेकिन हमारा ये वीडियो उन 99% लोगों के लिए है भी नहीं जिन्होंने ऑलरेडी गिव अप कर दिया। ये वीडियो उन 1% लोगों के लिए जिन्हें अभी भी फर्क पड़ता है। हे यस टीम, हम हमेशा सोचते थे कि मीडिया भारत के बारे में इतनी नेगेटिव क्यों, तो हमने एक पॉजिटिव सोल्यूशन बेस्ड अप्रोच अपनाया। अगर आपको ये वीडियो अच्छा लगा तो लाइक बटन।
It was in 2011 when I came across a little game that a teenage wiki.
One of the greatest illusions in life is continuity. 66 million years ago, the continuity of the dinosaurs had been going on for around 165 million years already, and it didn't seem this would change anytime soon. The world was warm and pleasant, and most of the land was covered with lush forests and an incredible diversity of trees, flowers, ferns, and trillions of critters. Dinosaurs were ubiquitous and had diversified into hundreds of species of all shapes and sizes. Titanosaurs, large, gentle giants, shared the world with famous beasts like Tyrannosaurus rex or Edmontosaurus. Pectinodon hunted in the undergrowth, while Edmontosaurus wandered coastlines and swamps. An ancient paradise, a world of plenty, full of life. 66 million years ago, maybe on a Tuesday afternoon, life was the same as it had been the day before, or 1,000 years before, or pretty much 1,000,000 years before. Things were good for our feathered dinosaur buddies, until a tiny, tiny detail in the sky changed. If there were dinosaurs watching the stars, one night they may have noticed the appearance of a new star, a tiny dot that for many weeks slowly became bigger and brighter. Until one fateful day, it looked like another small moon in the night sky. And then it faded from sight as it dipped into Earth's shadow. For a few more hours, the illusion of continuity was upheld, until it was not anymore. In the morning, the object suddenly appears again, now almost as large as the sun in the sky and growing every moment, heading for the coast near the Yucatan Peninsula. It takes the asteroid only seconds to pass through the thin layer between space and the ground to make contact, as it enters the atmosphere at almost 60 times the speed of sound. Let's stop time. Here, we see the unnamed asteroid about to commit speciescide. Larger than Mount Everest, it reaches from the ocean high into the atmosphere, higher than passenger planes would fly millions of years later. At this moment, the world was one way. In a fraction of a second, it will be fundamentally different. Let's make the transition. As the asteroid hits the shallow ocean and the bedrock below, the energy of billions of nuclear weapons is released all at once as the asteroid vaporizes. A flash of light illuminates the sky as an eerie bright white sphere grows over the Gulf of Mexico. Bedrock melts into seething hot plasma at tens of thousands of degrees Celsius. The thermal radiation from the explosion travels at the speed of light and immediately burns everything within a radius of about 1,500 kilometers, while the energy from the impact pushes so hard against Earth's crust that it loses all strength and flows away from the impact site like a liquid, creating a hole 25 kilometers deep and 100 kilometers wide. The ocean is pushed back for hundreds of kilometers, like when a kid jumps into a puddle. As the crust bounces back, melted and flowing crust forms a temporary mountain stretching 10 kilometers into the sky. An incredible amount of material is blasted into the higher atmosphere or even out into space, as much as 60 times the original mass of the asteroid. The violence of the strike is felt everywhere on Earth within minutes. A magnitude 11 earthquake may be the most powerful quake any living thing has ever witnessed in billions of years. It is so insanely strong that in India it might have shaken gigantic lava fields and causes volcanic eruptions that would last for 30,000 years and cover half of the Indian subcontinent with lava. Even on the side of Earth opposite the impact, the ground still moved by several meters. Nobody would sleep through this day. The gigantic explosion crashes against the atmosphere with unprecedented violence and causes a shockwave that reaches speeds of more than 1,000 kilometers per hour near the site of impact, similar to the hyperhurricanes on gas giants like Neptune. In Middle America, basically any soil, vegetation or animal is just shredded into pieces and catapulted thousands of kilometers away. Now the previously displaced oceans return. As the temporary mountain at the site of impact collapses, a ring of tsunamis as high as 1 kilometer, enough to cover all skyscrapers humans would ever build, heads in all directions. As they crash into the coasts of the continents surrounding the impact, they will drown thousands of kilometers of coastline. 15 hours later, some of the waves that get refracted around South America will still tower as much as 100 meters into the sky. But we still haven't talked about the worst thing yet. A lot of the debris yeeted into space will orbit Earth for thousands of years. Some may hit the Moon or even Mars. But most of it comes right back. When things fall through the atmosphere at such speeds, they get very hot, as in hundreds of degrees hot. And this happens to millions of tons of material everywhere. This rapidly heats up the atmosphere to insane temperatures. We don't know exactly how hot it got or how long this heat shock lasted, but there are two ideas here. Either the air was heated to hundreds of degrees for a few minutes, or to thousands of degrees for around 1 minute. In any case, the air became as hot as the inside of an industrial oven. How bad the global effects of this were is contested, but if enough heat reached the surface, a lot of plants and animals would have died very quickly if they couldn't bury themselves or escape into caves. The heat, together with raining debris, also may have ignited material on forest floors, and sparked wildfires as the Earth rotated under the searing hot plume. In a few hours, massive wildfires were probably burning around the globe. Some of them may have lasted for months and turned Earth into a horrifying, hot, hellish version of itself. As the day of the impact draws to an end, many of the dinosaurs are already dead, but the worst is still to come. The gigantic plume of vaporized material reaches the upper atmosphere and spreads around the whole globe. Together with the soot from the burning planet and the aerosols generated at impact, the planet sinks into a deep darkness, with only the remaining raging fires illuminating the scenery. Whatever plants survive the firestorms will now be starved for sunlight as global photosynthesis is temporarily shut down. Within days, temperatures crash as much as 25 degrees Celsius. The oceans were especially hard hit. The lack of sunlight killed over 90% of plankton, which form the basis of the food web of marine life. Ultimately, this would kill off the large marine reptiles and ammonites that used to dominate the seas. The biosphere the survivors now find themselves in is like an alien landscape. Ash, debris, and the burned remains of the formerly lush and blooming life cover the ground. The sky is dark and it's cold, and fresh food is scarce, while fungi thrive. For months and years, the planet will be a hostile and deadly place. The sudden global winter will last for decades. At least 75% of all species on Earth will just vanish from existence. And so, as the day ends, the world is suddenly different. The continuity that went on for millions of years is no more. The era of the dinosaurs is over, just like that. Eventually, from the ashes of the old world, survivors emerged. Birds that are the direct descendants of the dinosaurs and mammals that would eventually become the dominant animals on the planet. Without the asteroid, who knows what life on Earth would look like today? Without the sudden disruption of dinosaur continuity that completely changed the planet and all life on it, we might have never had the opportunity to become what we are today. It's not clear how long the human era will last. So far, modern humans have been around for 0.1% of the time the dinosaurs were. And in this short amount of time, we've achieved impressive feats, from making the world our own to reaching space and splitting the atom. Yet our future and our long-term survival are not a given. If we're not careful, it could end in an instant, like the age of the dinosaurs ended. But in contrast to them, we know that our continuity is fragile, even if it doesn't feel like it. We can be prepared and be vigilant and hopeful. If we're lucky, our journey will go on for a long, long time. Speaking of journeys, we want to address something in the spirit of transparency. Kurzgesagt has changed in the last 2 years. We've become more than a YouTube channel or animation studio, and now also run a paper shop that sells hundreds of thousands of calendars, posters, and notebooks.
So from the very start, we have been on Shopify, we've built the website all by ourselves.
Is there a border we will never cross? Are there places we will never reach, no matter how hard we try? It turns out there are. Even with sci-fi technology, we are trapped in a limited pocket of the universe and the finite stuff within it. How much universe is there for us, and how far can we go? If you look at the night sky, you might assume it will be there forever. Stars are born and die again in a cycle that feels endless. But it's not. Take the Milky Way, up to 200,000 light years in diameter, containing some 100 to 400 billion stars. How many stars do you think are born here each year? Thousands? Millions? The answer is around 3. 3 new stars per year. 95% of all the stars that will ever exist in the universe have already been born, and we live at the tail end of the age of star formation. We are at the beginning of the end of the universe as we know it. the formation of new stars will continue to slow down. But there's more. It turns out that the universe is rushing away from us. The Milky Way is not alone. Together with the Andromeda Galaxy and more than 50 dwarf galaxies, it forms the Local Group, a region of space about 10 million light-years in diameter, our galactic neighborhood. Hundreds of galaxy groups like the Local Group make up the Laniakea supercluster, which itself is only one of a myriad of superclusters. In total, there are around 2 trillion galaxies that make up the current observable universe. Unfortunately, even if we could travel at light speed, around 94% of the galaxies we can see are already unreachable for us forever. Let this number sink in for a moment. The simple fact that there's a limit for us and that there is so much universe that a human will never be able to touch is kind of frightening. Why are all of these galaxies out of reach already? Well, it all has to do with why there are galaxies in the first place, the Big Bang. We're simplifying here, but in a nutshell, about 10 to the power of minus 36 seconds after the Big Bang, the young universe was a very small bubble of energy. It wasn't completely uniform though. Some parts of it were a tiny bit denser than others, which had massive consequences. In a process called cosmic inflation, the observable universe expanded rapidly, from the size of a marble to trillions of kilometers in a trillionth of a second. That was so fast that all those tiny differences in density were stretched from subatomic distances into galactic distances, which is why the whole universe consists of more and less dense regions. Pockets of the universe filled with a bit more stuff than the space around them. After that short but powerful inflation ended, gravity began trying to pull everything back together. Inside the denser pockets, gravity emerged victorious, and so over time, they grew into groups of galaxies like the one we live in today. The Local Group is our pocket of the universe. But at larger scales, outside the denser pockets, the expansion of space never stopped. This means that our Local Group is surrounded by a lot of stuff, but none of those structures and galaxies are gravitationally bound to us. The more the universe expands, the larger the distance between us and the other gravitational pockets becomes. Even worse for us, the expansion of the universe is accelerating. We don't know why this happens, so we came up with the concept of dark energy. You can imagine it like an invisible effect that speeds up the expansion of the universe. We'll explain these concepts in more detail in another video though. For now, all you need to know is that the universe is expanding faster and faster. This expansion means that there's a cosmological horizon around us. Everything beyond it is traveling faster relative to us than the speed of light. So everything that passes the horizon is irretrievably out of reach forever, and we will never be able to interact with it again. In a sense, it's like a black hole's event horizon, but all around us. 94% of the galaxies we can see today have already passed it and are lost to us forever. Wait, if we can't interact with them, how come we can still see them? Well, the way we're able to see something is via light, and although the speed of light is the fastest way to travel through the universe, it needs time to get from one place to another. Every second, light reaches us from trillions of galaxies that have passed the horizon because when their light was emitted, they were much closer to us. We are looking at their ancient past and see their ancient positions. So the observable universe is much larger than the universe we can actually interact with. In a sense, the universe is putting off a great show for us, showing us things that are out of reach forever. We have no idea what these galaxies look like today, and we will never know. But we will be able to observe them for a long time as their light hits our telescopes. Interestingly, this means that currently the observable universe still appears to be growing as more and more light released by super distant galaxies billions of years ago is arriving at our doorsteps. Still, all the pockets of the universe outside the Local Group will one day pass our cosmological horizon. Once they do, their light won't be able to reach us anymore, and from our perspective, they will fade away into darkness. Every second of your life, 60,000 stars pass the horizon. Since you started watching this video, around 22 million stars have moved out of our reach forever. Okay, but if 94% of the observable universe is beyond the cosmic horizon and gone forever, that still leaves us with 6% that is technically in reach, which is still a ton of stuff. All the galaxy pockets that are less than 18 billion light-years away. They are still moving away, but slow enough that we could physically reach them, although the chances are shrinking with every second that passes. Everything that's more than around 5 million light-years away is moving away from us. But the closest galaxy groups are receding the slowest, so there is a time window to jump galaxy groups. The challenge is extreme though, even for Type 3 civilizations. Even at the speed of light, a trip to the Maphite group, the closest pocket of galaxies outside the local group, would take 11 million years. If some sort of super-motivated, super-advanced civilization takes this challenge on, its potential sphere of influence could expand to hundreds or thousands of galaxies. Although, as time passes and the universe grows, they would be separated forever. It's pretty safe to assume that humans will not make this journey, at least not with technologies that are even remotely on the horizon. For us, the local group is most likely the largest structure that we will ever be a part of. Just traveling between the stars would be an achievement of epic proportions. We would already be incredibly successful if we were to colonize our cosmic backyard, which accounts for 0.00000000001% of the observable universe. As dark energy pushes the rest of the universe away from us, the local group will become more tightly bound. All its galaxies, big and small, will merge together to form one giant elliptical galaxy with the unoriginal name Milkdromeda in a few billion years. This process might even smash huge gas clouds together and re-spark star formation for some time. And this new light will be very welcome because at some point the galaxies outside Milkdromeda will be so far away that they become too faint to detect. Once this happens, no information outside of the local group will reach us ever again. The universe will recede from view. A being born in the far future in Milkdromeda will think that the universe consists of nothing but its own galaxy. When they look far into empty space, they will only see more emptiness and darkness. They won't see cosmic background radiation, and they won't be able to learn about the Big Bang. They may have no way of knowing what we know today, the nature of the expanding universe, when it began, and how it will end. They might think the universe is static and eternal. Milkdromeda will be an island in the darkness, slowly getting darker and darker. Still, with its trillion stars, the local group is certainly a big enough playground to entertain humanity for a while. After all, we still haven't figured out how to leave our solar system, and we have dozens of billions of years at the very least to explore our galaxy. And we have the incredible luck to exist at the perfect moment in time to see not only our future, but also our most distant past just by looking into the night sky. As isolated as the local group is, it is our home. And it really is a spectacular place. Time for some behind-the-scenes content. You might have noticed that we sorta already made this video a few years ago, but the original had a regrettable mistake. In it, we said it would be physically impossible to ever leave the local group to reach other galaxy groups. But our travel limit is actually much larger, as we showed in this video. It's not physically impossible to go further, but just extremely unlikely that it'll ever happen. So why did we leave the video up? Well, it has to do with the nature of the mistake. We talked to astrophysicists, and they thought it didn't matter. The parts they considered important were correct, and they thought we should just leave it and move on. So with that feedback, we decided to spare the video. But since 2016, and really thanks to you burbs, we were able to grow Kurzgesagt and add fact-checkers to the team and develop an in-depth process with experts and our detailed sources documents to avoid these sorts of mistakes, and also to make our work transparent. We can't avoid making mistakes from time to time, but we can work hard on getting better, and this video kept bugging us. So we finally decided to replace it, not just re-upload, but remake it better and longer and add fun universe facts to make it worthwhile. Sorry for taking so long. We'll leave the old video up, but pin a comment and change the title. If you want to support us and our sometimes exhausting but hopefully worthwhile methods, you can watch, share and click the bell and get something from our shop. Inspired by this video's topic, we created a Milky Way poster and a local group poster, and we're working on a series about the entire universe. The world we live in feels normal, ordinary. It feels like this is just how humans exist and always existed. But it's not. Never before have we humans lived in a world as sophisticated and engineered to our needs as today, giving us the luxury to forget about ourselves and not worry about survival. Food, shelter, security, all of this is more or less taken for granted. But we're a special few. For more than 99.99% of human history, life was completely different. And there's no such thing as just one human history. Our story begins 6 million years ago, when the tribe of Hominini split and our relationship with the apes ended. 2.8 million years ago, the genus of Homo, the first humans, emerged. We like to think of ourselves as the only humans, but this is far from the truth. When we, Homo sapiens sapiens, came into existence 200,000 years ago, there were at least 6 other human species around. Cousins of comparable intelligence and ability, which must have been incredibly scary, kind of like living with aliens. Some of them were very successful. Homo erectus, for example, survived for 2 million years, 10 times longer than modern humans have existed. The last of the other humans disappeared around 10,000 years ago. We don't know what caused them to die out. Modern humans have at least a few % of Neanderthal and other human DNA, so there was some mixing, but certainly not enough to be a merger between species. So we don't know if our cousins went away because they lost the battle over resources or because of a series of minor genocides. Either way, only we remain. Back to the beginnings of humanity. 2.8 million years ago, early humans used tools but did not make a lot of progress for nearly 2 million years. Until they learned to control fire. Fire meant cooking, which made food more nutritious, which contributed to the development of our brain. It also produced light and warmth, which made days longer and winters less gruesome. On top of that, it not only scared predators away, it could also be used for hunting. A torched wood or grassland provided small animals, nuts and tubers that were pre-roasted. From 300,000 years ago, most of the different human species lived in small hunter-gatherer societies. They had fire, wood and stone tools, planned for the future, buried their dead, and had cultures of their own. But most importantly, they spoke to each other, probably in a kind of proto-language less complex than ours. If we had a time machine, how far would we be able to go back, steal a few babies, and raise them today without anyone noticing that they're a bit different? There is much debate. Anatomically modern humans emerged 200,000 years ago, but probably 70,000 years is as far as we could travel back and still snatch a behaviorally modern human. Before that, the babies would probably lack a few crucial gene mutations necessary to build a brain with modern language and abstract thinking abilities. At some point around 50,000 years ago, there was an explosion in innovation. Tools and weapons became more sophisticated, and culture became more complex, because at this point, humans had a multi-purpose brain and a more advanced language to communicate information with each other effectively and down to the last detail. This allowed much closer cooperation and is what really makes us different from any other creature on Earth. Not our comparatively weak bodies and inferior senses, but the ability to cooperate flexibly in large groups, unlike, for example, rigid beehives or intimate but tiny wolf packs. As our brain evolved, we became able to do something life had been unable to do up to this point. 1. Expand knowledge quickly. 2. Preserve the knowledge gained over generations. 3. Build on past knowledge to gain even deeper insights. This seems daft, but until then, information had to be passed on from generation to generation, mostly through genetics, which is not efficient. Still, for the next 40,000 years, human life remained more or less the same. There was little to build upon. Our ancestors were only one animal among many. Building a skyscraper without knowing what a house is hard. But while it's easy to be arrogant in our attitude to our ancestors, this would be ignorant. Humans 50,000 years ago were survival specialists. They had a detailed mental map of their territory, their senses were fine-tuned to the environment, they knew and memorized a great amount of information about plants and animals. They could make complicated tools that required years of careful training and very fine motor skills. Their bodies compared to our athletes today just because of their daily routines, and they lived a rich social life within their tribe. Survival required so many skills that the average brain volume of early modern humans might even have been bigger than it is today. As a group, we know more today, but as individuals, our ancestors were superior to us. But then, around 12,000 years ago in multiple locations, humans developed agriculture. Everything changed very quickly. Before, survival as a hunter and forager required superb physical and mental abilities in all fields from everybody. With the rise of the agricultural age, individuals could increasingly rely on the skills of others for survival. This meant that some of them could specialize. Maybe they worked on better tools. Maybe they took time to breed more resistant crops or better livestock. Maybe they started inventing things. As farming got more and more efficient, what we call civilization began. Agriculture gave us a reliable and predictable food source, which allowed humans to hoard food on a large scale for the first time, which is much easier to do with grains than meat. The food stock required protection, which led to communities living together in tighter spaces. First, early defense structures were built. The need for organization grew. The more organized we got, the faster things became efficient. Villages became cities, cities became kingdoms, kingdoms became empires. Connections between humans exploded, which led to opportunities to exchange knowledge. Progress became exponential. About 500 years ago, the scientific revolution began. Mathematics, physics, astronomy, biology and chemistry transformed everything we thought we knew. The Industrial Revolution followed soon after, laying the foundation for the modern world. As our overall efficiency grew exponentially, more people could spend their lifetime contributing to the progress of humanity. Revolutions kept happening. The invention of the computer, its evolution into a medium we all use on a daily basis, and the rise of the internet shaped our world. It's hard to grasp how fast all of that happened. It's been about 125,000 generations since the emergence of the first human species. About 7,500 generations since the physiologically modern human saw the light of day. 500 generations ago, what we call civilization began. 20 generations ago, we learned how to do science. And the internet became available to most people only 1 generation ago. Today, we live in the most prosperous age humanity has ever experienced. We have transformed this planet, from the composition of its atmosphere to large-scale changes in its landscape, and also in terms of the other animals in existence. We light up the night with artificial stars and put people in a metal box in the sky. Some have even walked on our moon. We put robots on other planets. We've looked deep into the past of the universe with mechanical eyes. Our knowledge and our way of acquiring and storing more of it has exploded. The average high school student today knows more about the universe than a scholar a few centuries ago. Humans dominate this planet, even if our rule is very fragile. We are still not that different from our ancestors 70,000 years ago, but your lifestyle has existed for less than 0.001% of human history. From here on, there's no saying what the future holds for us. We're building a skyscraper, but we're not sure if it's standing on a solid foundation or if we're building it on quicksand. Let's leave it with that for now. The next time you miss your train, your burger is not hot enough, or someone cuts in line, remember how special this made-up human world is. Maybe it's not worth being upset about all those little things. This video was supported by audible.com/nutshell. In the making of it, we used the book Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, as one of the major sources. If you want to get to it or any other book for free and support us, go to audible.com/nutshell and get a free 30-day trial. It's so hard to read books when you have the internet, so we can at least listen to them. In general, we listen to a lot of audiobooks while designing our videos, so we can highly recommend Audible. Okay, this was our first take on making a history-related video. We'd love to make much more of them, but they take even more time than our average video. So we might do 3 or 4 a year. Your feedback's very welcome here. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to support us directly, you can do so on Patreon. It really helps us out. While you think about it, here are more videos if you need more distraction. Is there a border we will never cross?
Grammarly can help you write quickly and confidently, so you never have to slow down at work. Stay on top.
If you had to choose right now, how long would you want to live? 80 years? 90? 120? Longer? And do you think you'll change your mind once you reach that age? 50,000 years ago, most humans died very young. As we learned how to use the resources around us to treat ourselves, this got better and better. Today, humans are living longer and healthier lives than ever before. But this has an unforeseen consequence. We spend an ever-increasing part of our lives being sick and in need of care. Most of us will die in a hospital bed, which is depressing enough by itself, but we also have to witness the same happening to our loved ones. Except, maybe, we can stop this forever. The most effective way to treat a disease is to prevent it. It saves many more lives if you stop 1 million people from smoking than coming up with better chemotherapies. So why not put a halt to the cause of all disease, the process of aging? In a nutshell, aging is caused by physics and not biology. Think of cars. Parts wear down from rubbing and grinding. Metal rusts, filters get plugged, rubber cracks. Our bodies are worn down by trillions of tiny physical processes. Oxygen, radiation from the sun, our metabolism. Our bodies have many mechanisms to repair this damage, but over time they become less effective. So our bones and muscles weaken, our skin wrinkles, our immune system gets weaker. We lose our memory and our senses diminish. There's no such thing as dying of old age. We all die because one of our important parts breaks. The older we get, the more damaged and fragile we become until one or multiple diseases take over and kill us. Unnoticed by most of us, longevity research has made some unprecedented advances in the last few years. For the first time, we're starting to understand the mechanisms behind aging and how to manipulate them. Aging is neither mystical nor inevitable, and we might be able to stop or delay it during your lifetime. We'll discuss the science behind it and how scientists are trying to stop it in another video. But first, if we could, should we end aging? Is this a good idea? The end of aging or life extension makes many people uncomfortable. We're born, are young, become older, and then we die. This has been the natural order for literally all of human history. And getting old is a good thing, right? We celebrate the idea of living long enough to experience old age. We even call them the golden years. But the reality is that everybody wants to become old, but nobody wants to be old. Think of the Greek myth of Tithonus, for example. Tithonus was the lover of the goddess Eos, and probably an amazing dude because she begged Zeus to grant him immortality so they could spend eternity together. But she forgot to specifically ask for eternal youth. Tithonus was granted eternal life, but he kept aging, unable to die, and eternity together. But she forgot to specifically ask for, so they could spend eternity together. But she forgot to specifically ask for eternal youth. Tithonus was granted eternal life, but he kept aging, unable to die. After a few hundred years, he was reduced to the size of a grape, babbling on senselessly forever. Thousands of years ago, humans already feared never-ending old age. But ending aging does Years ago, humans already feared never-ending old age. But ending aging does not mean getting weaker and weaker. If you become too old, it's too late. A 90-year-old who stopped aging would die anyway after a few years. Too much damage has been done to his internal machinery. There are already too many surfaces for disease to attack. Instead, the concept of life extension promises to end diseases and with them, the end of a fixed maximum age. We don't know how much we could prolong our lives. We might make every human healthy to the currently accepted maximum age of around 120, or we might stop biological aging and disease indefinitely. Nobody knows at this point what's possible. Okay, but even if we could achieve that, should we? Well, life extension is really just another phrase for medicine. All the doctors are doing is trying to prolong life and minimize suffering. The vast majority of healthcare resources are spent on the consequences of aging. Nearly half of your lifetime healthcare costs will be spent during your senior years and another third during middle age. We are actually already trying to prolong life with our current medicine, we're just doing it very inefficiently. Trying to stop aging from happening is not less natural than transplanting a heart, treating cancer with chemotherapy, using antibiotics or vaccines. Nothing humans do nowadays is purely natural anymore, and we enjoy the highest standard of living ever as a consequence of that. What we're doing right now is waiting until it's too late and the machine is failing. And then we use the vast majority of our resources trying to fix it as well as we can, while it breaks down even further. But life extension still feels hubristic. Most people assume that they will want to die once they reach a certain age, and this might still be true. The idea of avoiding death entirely is off-putting for many. The end of biological aging would not mean the end of death in any way. It's more like a summer evening when you were a kid and your mum called you inside. You just wanted to keep playing, have a little more fun during sunset before you went to sleep. It's not about playing outside forever, just a little longer until we feel tired. If you imagine a world without disease where you and your loved ones could live in good health for another 100 or 200 years, how would this change us? Would we take better care of our planet if we knew we would be around longer? If we could work for 150 years, how much time would we spend figuring out what we're good at? How much more time would we spend learning? Would the intense feeling of pressure and stress many of us are feeling right now go away or get worse? So, asking again, if you could choose how long to live right now, in good health and with your friends and family, what's your personal answer? What would you like your future to look like?
But maybe you're still unconvinced. Some nagging feeling remains. That is the Reaper whispering into your brain. Watch my video to hear what he says and why you shouldn't listen. Your eternal future may depend on it.
Go watch the other part over at CGP Gray's channel, and if you're not already subscribed, go watch the other part over at CGP Gray's channel, and
Somehow I must find a way to please.
In August 1947, India gained independence after 200 years of British rule. What followed was one of the largest and bloodiest forced migrations in history. An estimated 1 million people lost their lives. Before British colonization, the Indian subcontinent was a patchwork of regional kingdoms known as princely states, populated by Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, Christians, Parsis, and Jews. Each princely state had its own traditions, caste backgrounds, and leadership. Starting in the 1500s, a series of European powers colonized India with coastal trading settlements. By the mid-18th century, the English East India Company emerged as the primary colonial power in India. The British ruled some provinces directly and ruled the princely states indirectly. Under indirect rule, the princely states remained sovereign, but made political and financial concessions to the British. In the 19th century, the British began to categorize Indians by religious identity, a gross simplification of the communities in India. They counted Hindus as majorities, and all other religious communities as distinct minorities, with Muslims being the largest minority. Sikhs were considered part of the Hindu community by everyone but themselves. In elections, people could only vote for candidates of their own religious identification. These practices exaggerated differences, sowing distrust between communities that had previously coexisted. The 20th century began with decades of anti-colonial movements, where Indians fought for independence from Britain. In the aftermath of World War II, under enormous financial strain from the war, Britain finally caved. Indian political leaders had differing views on what an independent India should look like. Mohandas Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru represented the Hindu majority and wanted one united India. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who led the Muslim minority, thought the rifts created by colonization were too deep to repair. Jinnah argued for a two-nation division where Muslims would have a homeland called Pakistan. Following riots in 1946 and 1947, the British expedited their retreat, planning Indian independence behind closed doors. In June 1947, the British Viceroy announced that India would gain independence by August and be partitioned into Hindu India and Muslim Pakistan, but gave little explanation of how exactly this would happen. Using outdated maps, inaccurate census numbers, and minimal knowledge of the land, in a mere 5 weeks, the Boundary Committee drew a border, dividing 3 provinces under direct British rule: Bengal, Punjab, and Assam. The border took into account where Hindus and Muslims were majorities, but also factors like location and population percentages. So if a Hindu majority area bordered another Hindu majority area, it would be included in India. But if a Hindu majority area bordered Muslim majority areas, it might become part of Pakistan. Princely states on the border had to choose which of the new nations to join, losing their sovereignty in the process. While the Boundary Committee worked on the new map, Hindus and Muslims began moving to areas where they thought they'd be a part of the religious majority, but they couldn't be sure. Families divided themselves. Fearing sexual violence, parents sent young daughters and wives to regions they perceived to be safe. The new map wasn't revealed until August 17, 1947, 2 days after independence. The provinces of Punjab and Bengal became the geographically separated East and West Pakistan. The rest became Hindu majority India. In a period of 2 years, millions of Hindus and Sikhs living in Pakistan left for India, while Muslims living in India fled villages where their families had lived for centuries. The cities of Lahore, Delhi, Calcutta, Dhaka, and Karachi emptied of old residents and filled with refugees. In the power vacuum British forces left behind, radicalized militias and local groups massacred migrants. Much of the violence occurred in Punjab, and women bore the brunt of it, suffering rape and mutilation. Around 100,000 women were kidnapped and forced to marry their captors. The problems created by partition went far beyond this immediate deadly aftermath. Many families who made temporary moves became permanently displaced, and borders continued to be disputed. In 1971, East Pakistan seceded and became the new country of Bangladesh. Meanwhile, the Hindu ruler of Kashmir decided to join India, a decision that was to be finalized by a public referendum of the majority Muslim population. That referendum still hasn't happened as of 2020, and India and Pakistan have been warring over Kashmir since 1947. More than 70 years later, the legacies of the partition remain clear in the subcontinent, in its new political formations, and in the memories of divided families. When we read over accounts of the past, the perspectives of young people
This is going too far. Pellegrini kidnapped my son.
It was the largest contiguous land empire in history, stretching from Korea to Ukraine and from Siberia to southern China, and was forged on the open plains. In the 12th century CE, before the Mongol Empire formed, the East Asian steppe was home to scattered groups of Mongol and Turkic pastoral nomads led by Khans. The people herded sheep, cattle, yaks, and camels. They lived in felt tents and moved between summer and winter campsites. Nomadic women held significant authority, managing these migrations, many of the flocks, and trade. Meanwhile, men specialized in mounted warfare. These nomadic groups often fought each other. That was to change under Temujin, who was born into an aristocratic Mongol family. Despite losing his father at an early age and growing up in poverty, he quickly rose to power by forging strategic alliances with other leaders. Unlike those Khans, Temujin promoted soldiers based on merit and distributed spoils evenly among them. His most brilliant move was to scatter the nomads he conquered among his own soldiers so they couldn't join together against him. These innovations made him unstoppable, and by 1206 he had united the people of the felt-walled tents and become Genghis Khan. The Mongols were shamanists, believing that the spirits of nature and their ancestors inhabited the world around them. Over all arched the sky god Tengiri. Genghis Khan believed that Tengiri wanted him to conquer the entire world in his name. With the nomads of the Mongolian plain united, this seemed within reach. Anyone who resisted the Mongols was resisting Tengiri's will, and for this insubordination had to die. Under Genghis Khan, the Mongols first subdued northern China and the eastern Islamic lands. After his death in 1227, the divine mandate passed to his family, or the Golden Lineage. In the 1230s, Genghis Khan's sons and daughters conquered the Turks of Central Asia and the Russian princes, then destroyed 2 European armies in 1241. In the 1250s, the Mongols seized Islamic territory as far as Baghdad, while in the east, their grasp reached southern China by 1279. Life within the Mongol Empire wasn't just war, pillage, and destruction. Once the Mongols conquered a territory, they left its internal politics alone and used local administrators to govern for them. The Mongols let all religions flourish, as long as the leaders prayed for them. Although they routinely captured artisans, scholars, and engineers, they appreciated what those specialists could do and forcibly settled them across Asia to continue their work. The most valuable produce in the empire was gold brocade, which took silk from China, gold from Tibet, and weavers from Baghdad. Gold brocade clothed the Mongol rulers, covered their horses, and lined their tents. The Mongols particularly prized gunpowder technicians from China. With much of Eurasia politically unified, trade flourished along the Silk Road, helped by an extensive system of horse messengers and relay posts. Robust trade continued at sea, especially in blue and white porcelain, which combined white pottery from Mongol China with blue dye from Mongol Iran. But this was not to last. Succession to the Great Khan didn't automatically go to the eldest son, but rather allowed brothers, uncles, and cousins to vie for leadership, with senior widows acting as regents for their sons. By the 1260s, Genghis Khan's grandsons were in a full-blown civil war over inheritance and fragmented the realm into 4 separate empires. In China, Kublai Khan's Yuan dynasty is remembered as a golden age of science and culture. In Iran, the Ilkhanate inaugurated the development of new monumental architecture and Persian miniature painting. In Central Asia, the Chagatai Khanate brought forth leaders like Timur and his descendant Babur, who founded the Mughal Empire in India. And in Eastern Europe, the Golden Horde ruled for years, until a trading post named Muscovy grew into a major world power. Even though the empire lasted only a short while, the Mongols left a legacy of world domination that remains unmatched today. Trace the rise and fall of other powerful empires with this playlist.
क्या कैप्टन गुल का हेलीकॉप्टर शॉट यहाँ से आया? क्या ये किंग के कवर ड्राइव करास?
Humans are proud of a lot of things, from particle accelerators to poetry to Pokemon. All of them made possible because of something humans value extremely highly: intelligence. We think of intelligence as a trait, like height or strength, but when we try to define it, things get fuzzy. In a nutshell, intelligence is a mechanism to solve problems, especially the problem of staying alive, which involves finding food and shelter, fighting sexual competitors, or fleeing from predators. Intelligence is not a single thing. It includes the ability to gather knowledge, to learn, be creative, form strategies, or engage in critical thinking. It manifests itself in a huge variety of behaviors, from hardwired or instinct-like reactions to different degrees of learning to some sort of awareness. But not all scientists agree where it begins or what even should count as intelligence. To make this even more complicated, intelligence is also connected to consciousness, since awareness is helpful for problem solving. But we're exploring consciousness in other videos, so today we'll leave it aside. Okay, intelligence isn't exactly clear-cut, so maybe we can think of it as more like a flexible set of skills, a toolbox. Basic tools. The most basic tools in the intelligence toolbox are the ability to gather information, to save it, and to use it to learn. Information about the world is gathered through senses such as vision, sound, smell, touch, or taste, and helps us navigate and react to the external world appropriately. But living things also need to keep track of the state of their own bodies, monitoring things like hunger and fatigue. Information is the basis of action for all living things, and without it, you're at the mercy of your surroundings, unable to react appropriately or flexibly. Information is much more powerful if we can keep and save it. So the second tool is memory. Memory is the ability to save and recall information so a living being doesn't have to start from scratch every time it perceives something relevant. Memories can be about events, places, and associations, but also behaviors like hunting or foraging methods. Some of these, like flying, have to be repeated over and over until they're mastered. This is what we call learning, the process of putting together a sequence of thoughts or actions. Basically a string of repeatable behaviors that can be varied and adapted. These three tools enable seemingly stupid creatures to act in surprisingly intelligent ways. The acellular slime mold, which is basically just a single huge slimy cell, shows behavior similar to an animal with a simple brain. When put in a maze with food at one end, the slime mold explores its surroundings and marks its path with slime trails, sort of smearing memories on the ground. As it continues exploring, it avoids the marked pathways and finds its way to the food. Instead of blindly getting stuck in dead ends, the slime mold adapts its behavior to save time and effort. This behavior is hardwired, and scientists can't agree if that's intelligent, although it does give the slime mold a certain advantage. Bees are an example of more adaptive smart behavior. Scientists trained bumblebees to move a colored ball into a goalpost for a sugar reward. Not only were the bees very skillful at this behavior, which isn't natural to them, they got more efficient over time. When several balls were available, bees chose the ball that lay closest to the goal, even if it was a different color than the ball they were trained with. For more challenging problems, we need even more flexibility. Fancier tools. Building on the basic tools, more complex animals have a wider range of problems they can solve. They can memorize all kinds of associations, connections, and mechanical tricks. We'll call this tool the Library of Knowledge. Take raccoons. Their favorite kind of food is human food. Their approach to getting hold of such treats depends upon an assortment of theoretical and practical skills that makes them master burglars, able to open windows or pick locks. In a study, raccoons were given boxes secured with different kinds of locks, like latches, bolts, plugs, or push bars. They needed less than 10 attempts to figure out how to open each box, even when different locks were put together into increasingly difficult combinations that had to be solved in the right order and with different amounts of strength. A year later, the raccoons still remembered how to open the boxes and were as fast as when they had first solved the puzzle. Beyond our library of associations and skills, the most impressive tool in our box is creativity, a sort of mental duct tape. Being creative means producing something new and valuable from apparently unrelated things. In the context of intelligence, this means making new and unusual connections, pairing input with memories and skills to come up with a unique solution to a problem. In another raccoon study, researchers showed the animals that by dropping pebbles into a water tank, they could raise the water level enough to reach a marshmallow floating at the top. One raccoon came up with a much better solution. It tipped the tub over. Another facet of creativity is applying a new resource to a task, physical tools. Like primates that use sticks to fish for termites in trees, or some octopuses which assemble collected coconut shells around themselves as a sort of portable armor to hide from enemies. Collecting materials for later use is connected to an even more advanced dimension of problem solving, planning. Planning means considering the activities required for a desired goal and putting them together in a plan. When unforeseen circumstances and new possibilities present themselves, they need to be assessed according to whether they match the plan or not. An example of this intelligent behavior is hoarding food to eat it later. This is an instinctive behavior in squirrels. But even though hiding food comes instinctively to them, they still need to use advanced thinking skills to make the best decisions. Squirrels examine every nut and weigh the time and effort it would take to hide it against the benefits they would get from each one. Damaged or low-fat nuts are eaten right away, while nuts that still need to ripen go on the stockpile. Squirrels also pretend to bury nuts when they feel watched. These empty caches distract rivals from their real treasure. This is pretty advanced strategizing because to make a plan to distract someone else, you first have to be aware that there are others like you that want the same things. The more complex the problem, the more tools are needed in combination to solve it. So the more tools there are, the more flexibility a being has to solve the challenges life throws at them. But even for complex problems, each animal's individual situation is what counts. Squirrels are omnivores that defend their territories fiercely. For them, it makes sense to remember where there's food in different locations and trick their enemies to improve their chances of survival. Sheep don't have any such refined tricks up their sleeve, but they don't need to. They are grazers and live in flocks. The skills relevant to them are social. They recognize and remember many different sheep and even humans for years, a completely different skill. Evolving and retaining a complex set of mental abilities they might never use would be a waste of resources for them. Humans went the opposite way and invested in an unusually diverse intelligence toolkit. While this was helpful, by accident we added another set of tools on top: culture. No single person could ever build a space rocket or particle accelerator. But thanks to our ability to work together and to share knowledge across generations, we can overcome challenges beyond any single individual's ability. This allowed us to shape the planet to our liking. We also created new problems in the process: Sudoku, tax forms, string theory, but also rapid climate change and antibiotic resistance. To solve these, we'll need to look past short-term survival and think about the distant future. We have the toolbox. We just need to use it. Speaking of tools for learning, we've heard from many teachers that are using our infographic posters in class. So we asked what would help them the most and made an education edition for teachers, students, and everyone else. They're slightly larger posters about various things that will expand over time, from a periodic table to a world map or the human body. You can get them in our shop and support us if you want. And let us know which poster topics you want for your room or classroom. This video was part 2 of a 3-part video series relating to big questions of At this very second, you are on a narrow ledge between life and death. You probably don't feel it, but there's an incredible amount of activity going on inside you. And this activity can never stop. Picture yourself as a slinky falling down an escalator moving upwards. The falling part represents the self-replicating processes of your cells. The escalator represents the laws of physics driving you forwards. To be alive is to be in motion but never arriving anywhere. If you reach the top of the escalator, there's no more falling possible and you are dead forever. Somewhat unsettlingly, the universe wants you to reach the top. How do you avoid that, and why are you alive? All life is based on the cell. A cell is a piece of the dead universe that separated itself from the rest so it could do its own thing for a while. When this separation breaks down, it dies and joins the rest of the dead universe again. Unfortunately, the universe would like for life to be done with doing its own thing. For some reason, it's not a fan of exciting things, but tries to be as boring as possible. We call this principle entropy, and it's a fundamental rule of our universe. It's pretty complicated and counterintuitive, so we'll explain it in detail in another video. For now, all you need to know is living things are inherently exciting. A cell is filled up with millions of proteins and millions more simpler molecules like water. Thousands of complex self-replicating processes are happening up to hundreds of thousands of times every second. To stay alive and exciting, it has to constantly work to keep itself from achieving entropy and becoming boring and dead. The cell has to maintain the separation from the rest of the universe. It's doing this, for example, by keeping the concentration of certain molecules different on the inside and the outside by actively pumping out excess molecules. To do stuff like this, a cell needs energy. Energy is the ability of things in the universe to do work, to move or manipulate a thing, to create change. This ability cannot be created or destroyed. The set amount of energy in the universe will never change. We don't know why, it just is that way. So, billions of years ago, one of the most crucial challenges for the first living beings was to get usable energy. We don't know a lot about the first cells, except that they got their energy from simple chemical reactions. And they found the ultimate energy transfer system, the energetic building block of life, the molecule adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. Its structure makes it uniquely good at accepting and releasing energy. When a cell needs energy, for example to pump out molecules or to repair a broken micromachine, it can break down ATP and use the chemical energy to do work and create change. This is why living beings are able to do stuff. We don't know when or how exactly the first ATP molecule was made on Earth, but every living thing we know uses ATP or something very similar to keep its internal machinery running. It's crucial for almost every process plants, fungi, bacteria, and animals need to survive. Without ATP, no life on Earth, possibly anywhere. While breaking down chemicals for energy is nice and all, early life did miss out on the greatest available source of energy, the sun. Breaking down chemicals for energy Without ATP, no life on Earth, possibly anywhere. While breaking down chemicals for energy is nice and all, early life did miss out on the greatest available source of energy, the sun. The sun merges atoms and radiates photons away that carry energy into the solar system. But this energy is raw and indigestible. It needs to be refined. After hundreds of millions of years of evolution, finally, a cell figured out how to eat the sun. It absorbed radiation and converted much of it into neat little chemical packages that it could use to stay alive. We call this process photosynthesis. You take photons that are wobbly with electromagnetic energy and use a part of this energy to merge and combine different molecules together. The electromagnetic energy is converted into chemical energy stored in the ATP molecule. This process became even better as some cells learned to create better chemical packages. Glucose, or sugar, easy to break down, high in energy, and pretty tasty. This is so convenient that some cells decided that instead of doing all that pesky photosynthesis work themselves, they would just swallow other cells that did and take their glucose and ATP. This is widely considered one of the biggest anime betrayals in evolutionary history. And so things went on. Photosynthesizing cells could mostly harness energy at their surfaces, which limited their maximum energy production, which limited their evolutionary avenues somewhat. So time passed. Some cells made sugar, others ate them. Evolution did its thing, but overall things stayed pretty much the same for hundreds of millions of years. Until one day, a cell ate another and did not kill it. Instead, they became one cell. Nothing had changed that day, but Earth would be different forever. This cell became the ancestor of all animals on this planet. Blue whales, amoeba, dinosaurs, jellyfish, pink fairy armadillos, and sundakulugos. And of course, you. All can trace back their existence to this moment. The merging of two living beings is so important because when those two cells became one, they became way more powerful. The formerly independent cell in the inside could stop trying to survive. It could concentrate on one thing, make ATP. It became the powerhouse of the cell, the first mitochondria. The host cell's job became to ensure survival in the dangerous world and provide the mitochondria with food. Mitochondria basically reverse photosynthesis in a similarly complex process. They take sugar molecules that we got from eating other living things, combust them with oxygen and precursor molecules to make new, energy-rich ATP molecules. This process works like a tiny furnace and spits out waste products like CO2, water, and a little bit of kinetic energy that you experience as body heat. This first division of labor meant the new cell had way more energy available than any cell before, which meant more possibilities for evolution to enable more complex cells. At some point, these cells began to form small groups or communities, which led to multicellular life and finally to you. Today, you are a pile of trillions of cells, each filled with dozens, if not hundreds of little machines that provide you with usable energy to stay alive. If this process is interrupted, even for a few minutes, you die. But if life is so fragile, wouldn't it be a good idea to store ATP, like we store sugar in our fat cells, so we don't die if we stop breathing for a while? If life has solved so many problems to make you live today, what's up with the dying quickly thing? Even simple bacteria like E. coli make about 50 times their body weight in ATP for every cell division. Your trillions of cells need a lot of ATP to keep you around. Every day, your body produces and converts about 90 million billion molecules of ATP, about your own body weight. You need a whole person's worth of ATP just to make it through a single day. Even storing enough ATP to last you a few minutes is basically impossible. An ATP molecule is really good for shifting energy around quickly, but it's terrible for storage since it has only 1% of a glucose molecule's energy at 3 times its mass. So ATP is constantly produced and used up fairly quickly. This was the short and simplified story of the molecule that allows you to be different from the dead universe and to be the slinky on the escalator. It is a weird story. There is this molecule you need to survive at all times. You need it to keep moving because even a short break brings your slinky to a stop. And you need to make it yourself. It's like driving a car at full speed while producing fuel in the trunk with junk that you pick up from the side of the road. As far as we know, this all began billions of years ago when tiny parts of the dead universe came together and became something else for a moment. It could keep itself going. It could grow. That moment set the slinky in motion, and it's been going ever since. From the very first cells to you watching this now. At some point, you will merge with the rest of the dead universe again. Maybe you'll tell it stories about your adventures. Maybe not. But before you find out, you get to do what life does best. Making a dead universe much more interesting. If you are currently bored for whatever reason and you want to make your life more interesting, we've got something for you. We partnered with Skillshare, an online learning Every second of your life, you are under attack. Billions of bacteria, viruses, and fungi are trying to make you their home. So our bodies have developed a super complex little army with guards, soldiers, intelligence, weapons factories, and communicators to protect you from, well, dying. For this video, let's assume the immune system has 12 different jobs. For example, kill enemies, communicate, etc. And it has 21 different cells and 2 protein forces. These cells have up to 4 different jobs. Let's assign them. Here are the interactions. Now, let's make this understandable. First of all, let's add colors to the jobs. Now, let's illustrate the cells. The central color represents the main job of the cell, while the surrounding ones represent secondary duties. Now, the immune system looks like this. Now, the interactions. Isn't this complexity just awesome? For this video, we will only talk about these cells and ignore the rest. So what happens in the case of an infection? It's a beautiful day when suddenly a wild rusty nail appears and you cut yourself. The first barrier of the immune system is breached, your skin. Nearby bacteria seize on the opportunity and enter your wound. They start using up the body's resources and double their numbers about every 20 minutes. At first, they fly under the radar, but when a certain bacteria population is reached, they change their behavior and start to damage the body by changing the environment around them. The immune system has to stop them as fast as possible. First of all, your guard cells, known as macrophages, intervene. They are huge cells that guard every border region of the body. Most of the time, they alone can suffocate an attack because they can devour up to 100 intruders each. They swallow the intruder whole and trap it inside a membrane. Then the enemy gets broken down by enzymes and is killed. On top of that, they cause inflammation by ordering the blood vessels to release water into the battlefield, so fighting becomes easier. You notice this as a very mild swelling. When the macrophages fight for too long, they call in heavy backup by releasing messenger proteins that communicate location and urgency. Neutrophils leave their patrol routes in the blood and move to the battlefield. The neutrophils fight so furiously that they kill healthy cells in the process. On top of that, they generate barriers that trap and kill the bacteria. They are indeed so deadly that they evolved to commit suicide after 5 days to prevent them from causing too much damage. If this is not enough to stop the invasion, the brain of the immune system kicks in. The dendritic cell gets active. It reacts to the signals of the soldiers and starts collecting samples from the enemies. They rip them into pieces and present the parts on their outer layer. Now, the dendritic cell makes a crucial decision. Should they call for antivirus forces that eradicate infected body cells or an army of bacteria killers? In this case, antibacteria forces are necessary. It then travels to the closest lymph node in about a day. Here, billions of helper and killer T cells are waiting to be activated. When T cells are born, they go through a difficult and complicated training process, and only a quarter survives. The surviving cells are equipped with a specific setup. And the dendritic cell is on its way looking for a helper T cell with a setup that's just right. It's looking for a helper T cell that can bind to the parts of the intruders which the dendritic cell has presented on its membrane. When it finally finds one, a chain reaction takes place. The helper T cell is activated. It quickly duplicates thousands of times. Some become memory T cells that stay in the lymph node and will make you practically immune against this enemy. Some travel to the field of battle to help out. And the third group goes on to travel to the center of the lymph node to activate a very powerful weapons factory. Like the T cells, they're born with a specific setup. And when a B cell and a T cell with the same setup meet, hell breaks loose. The B cell duplicates rapidly and starts producing millions of little weapons. They work so hard that they would literally die from exhaustion very fast. Here, helper T cells play another important role. They stimulate the hard-working factories and tell them, "Don't die yet, we still need you, keep going." This also ensures that the factories die if the infection is over, so the body doesn't waste energy or hurt itself. But what is produced by the B cells? You've heard of them, of course, antibodies. Little proteins that are engineered to bind to the surface of the specific intruder. There are even different kinds of antibodies that have slightly different jobs. The helper T cells tell the plasma cells which type is needed the most in this particular invasion. Millions of them flood the blood and saturate the body. Meanwhile, at the site of infection, the situation is getting dire. The intruders have multiplied in number and start hurting the body. Guard and attack cells fight hard, but also die in the process. Helper T cells support them by ordering them to be more aggressive and to stay alive longer. But without help, they can't overwhelm the bacteria. But now the second line of defense arrives. Billions of antibodies flood the battlefield and disable lots of the intruders, rendering them helpless or killing them in the process. They also stun the bacteria and make them an easy target. Their back is built to connect to killer cells, so they can connect and kill the enemy more easily. Macrophages are especially good at gnoming up the bacteria which antibodies have attached to. Now, the balance shifts. In a team effort, the infection is wiped out. At this point, millions of body cells have already died. No big deal, the losses are quickly replenished. Most immune cells are now useless, and without the constant signals, they commit suicide, so as not to waste any resources. But some stay behind, the memory cells. If this enemy is encountered ever again in the future, they will be ready for it and probably kill it before you even notice. This was a very simplified explanation of parts of the immune system at work. Can you imagine how complex this system is? Even at this level, when we ignore so many players and all the chemistry. Life is awfully complicated, but if we take the time to understand it, we always encounter endless wonders and great beauty.
So from the very start, we have been on Shopify. We've built the website all by ourselves.
Vaccines are celebrated for their part in fighting disease. But a growing group of people seem to believe that they endanger our health instead of protecting it. The internet is full of stories about allergic reactions, the onset of disabilities, and even death following vaccination appointments. And it's true, vaccines can have side effects. Let's look at how they work and how dangerous they really are. Your immune system is a complex army of billions of cells, soldiers, intelligence cells, and weapons factories. Every day you're attacked countless times, but your immune soldiers alone usually deal with that, so you don't even notice. If an infection becomes serious though, our intelligence cells gather intel about the attackers and activate our weapons factories. You know the weapon? Antibodies. They're like targeted missiles, produced specifically to combat the invader. Unfortunately, this process takes several days to complete. That gives intruders a lot of time to do damage. Contrary to popular wisdom, what doesn't kill you doesn't make you stronger. Our bodies really don't want to fight serious wars over and over, so our immune system came up with an ingenious way to get stronger and stronger over time. If we fight an enemy that is dangerous enough to trigger our heavy weapons, our immune system automatically creates memory cells. Memory cells remain in our body for years in a deep sleep. They do nothing but remember. When an enemy attacks for a second time, the slumbering memory cells awaken and order coordinated attacks and the production of antibodies. This is so fast and effective that many infections you beat once will never make you sick again. You might even be immune against them forever, which is also why little kids are constantly ill. They don't have enough memory cells yet. And this beautiful natural mechanism is what we build on when we use vaccines. How vaccines work. As great as memory cells are, obtaining them through an infection is unpleasant and sometimes dangerous. Vaccines are a way of tricking our bodies into making memory cells and becoming immune to a disease. They pretend to be a dangerous infection. One way of doing this is to inject invaders that can't do harm. For example, by killing them or by ripping them into pieces. Our immune systems deal with these kinds of vaccines pretty easily. Sometimes it's necessary to make our immune system work harder, though, to produce even more memory cells. Live vaccines are the real deal. An enemy that can punch back is a bigger challenge than a dead one. But this also sounds like a sort of horrible idea. What if the germs win? To avoid that, we breed a sort of weak cousin of the real germ in the lab. Just powerful enough to annoy the immune system and create enough memory cells. Okay, so these are the basic principles of vaccine use. They provoke a natural reaction in our bodies that makes us become immune against very dangerous diseases. Some, like the flu virus, mutate so often that we need a new vaccine every year, but most vaccines protect us for years, or even a lifetime. But there's a catch. Like everything in life, vaccines have another side. Side effects. What are they, and what happens if your child develops one? The risks of vaccines. It's complicated to directly compare the side effects of vaccines with the effects of diseases. For example, hundreds of millions of people are vaccinated against measles in the West, but there were only 83,000 cases in Europe in 2018. So with numbers that different, even mild side effects can seem scary compared to the bad effects of a disease that we don't see as much anymore. Before the measles vaccine became available in 1963, virtually every single child on Earth contracted measles at some point. An estimated 135 million cases in the 1950s, every single year. But are measles really that dangerous in the year 2019 with our advanced healthcare and new technologies? Are they worth the risk of vaccine side effects? Let's do a thought experiment based on real numbers. Imagine a developed country in a parallel world. It has good healthcare, but people stop vaccinating. In this scenario, let's say 10 million children caught measles. What happens? 9,800,000 or 98% will get a high fever and a very unpleasant rash. Up to 800,000 of them, or 8%, will suffer from dangerous diarrhea. 700,000 or 7% will suffer from an ear infection, which can lead to permanent hearing loss. 600,000 kids, or 6%, will suffer from pneumonia, the most dangerous effect of measles. It alone will kill 12,000 children. Up to 10,000 children, or 0.1%, will get encephalitis. 2,500 kids, or 0.025%, will contract SSPE, a disease where the measles virus lingers in their brain and kills them a few years later. Taken together, around 2.5 million children will suffer from somewhat serious effects from measles, and about 20,000 children will be killed by measles. It doesn't stop here, though. The kids who beat measles are left with a severely damaged immune system that needs a lot of time to regenerate. Time for other diseases to do further damage. Aside from that, what's almost guaranteed is that your kids will have a really bad time for about 2 weeks. Okay, but what about vaccines? It's only fair to look at these risks too. So let's repeat our thought experiment, but this time we vaccinate 10 million children with MMR. What would theoretically happen here? After being vaccinated, of our 10 million kids, around 10% get a fever. 500,000 or 5% will get a mild rash. Up to 100 or 0.001% might have a serious allergic reaction and will have to be treated. Up to 10 boys or 0.0001% might get inflammation of the genitalia. And up to 10 kids in total, or 0.0001%, might get the most serious side effect, encephalitis. So we vaccinated 10 million kids. In total, around 120 had side effects that were somewhat serious. Thanks to good medical treatment in developed regions, almost all of them will be fine. What about autism? The connection of autism and vaccines stems from one source that has been disproven countless times. We'll link to further reading and videos in the description. But in 2019, it's fair to say that vaccines do not cause autism. Alright, but what about deaths? It's really hard to say if even a single one of our 10 million vaccinated kids would die. We really did look hard and talk to a lot of different experts. If we ignore self-reporting, we could only come up with a tiny handful of documented cases for all the hundreds of millions of children who received the MMR vaccine since 1971. Measles are many, many thousands of times more dangerous for your child than even the absolute worst case of vaccine side effects. You have to search for lethal vaccine side effects with a huge magnifying glass, and even then it's very hard to find confirmed cases, while deaths from measles are real and easy to find. In 2017 alone, 110,000 people died from measles worldwide. Statistically, today 300 children will die of measles. One since this video started. You can compare vaccines to seatbelts. Are there weird freak accidents where someone gets killed by their seatbelt? Well, yes. But do you personally think it's safer to not put a seatbelt on your kid? Wait a second. What if your kid is actually allergic? What if none of the things we've said applies to your specific situation? In this case, you need to become the greatest vaccination promoter of all. Because if your children can't be vaccinated, only the collective can protect them. This is called herd immunity, and it's the only thing that can protect your unvaccinated child. Herd immunity means that enough people are immune to a disease that it can't spread and dies before it reaches its victims. But to accomplish this for measles alone, 95% of the people around you need to be vaccinated. Conclusion. The problem with the debate about vaccines is that it's not fought on a level playing field. While the pro-vaccine side argues with studies and statistics, the arguments against them are usually a wild mixture of gut feeling, anecdotes and misinformation. And feelings are often immune to facts. We'll not convince anybody by screaming at them, but we can't hide from the reality of what anti-vaccine conspiracies do. They kill babies too young to be vaccinated. They kill healthy children that are just unlucky. They bring serious diseases back from the verge of extinction. And the biggest side effect of vaccines is fewer dead children. Vaccines are one of the most powerful tools we have to eradicate the monsters that most of us have already forgotten. Let's not bring the beasts back. When our vegetarian ancestors started eating meat around 2 million years ago, it wasn't just because animals taste great, it was pure necessity. Climate change made many of the plants our ancestors relied on less available, and meat bridged that gap. From the discovery of fire at the latest, meat became a staple of the human diet. But over the last few years, eating meat has increasingly been associated with health risks like heart disease, certain cancers, and an early death. So, how unhealthy is meat really? In this video, we'll only talk about meat. Dairy products deserve a video of their own. Biologically, we need to eat for 3 reasons: for energy, to acquire materials to fabricate our cells, and to get special molecules that our bodies can't make themselves. The energy and most of the materials come from the 3 macronutrients: fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. Proteins are the most important resource for repairing and replenishing our cell structures. The special molecules are a large variety of vitamins and minerals we need to drive metabolic processes. Meat provides us with most of these things. It contains all essential amino acids our body needs and a lot of minerals like iron, zinc, and essential vitamins, some of which are barely found in plants like vitamin B12. Only one essential nutrient is missing in most of the meat we consume: vitamin C. It appears in almost all plants and supports our immune system as well as the development of connective tissues. After a few months without it, you'd get scurvy. But meat has another big advantage: its high bioavailability. Some of the nutrients in meat are broken down faster and available quicker than those from plants. Spinach, for example, contains more iron than meat, but it's absorbed much slower and the body needs more energy to digest it. Several health benefits have also been observed in communities that rely solely on meat. The Inuit, for example, are able to survive in extreme climate conditions on a purely meat-based diet if necessary. Since they consume the whole animal, including the organs, they get every single nutrient they need, including vitamin C. So meat itself is definitely not dangerous for us, but its health effects vary depending on how it's prepared and what animal it comes from. When talking about meat in the Western world, we generally mean muscle tissues that have a high nutrient density but also lack some of the vitamins that make it possible to survive on meat alone. The most healthy animals to eat are probably fish. Fish contains polyunsaturated fatty acids like omega-3, which may lower the risk of cardiovascular diseases and support anti-inflammatory immune functions. As part of a balanced diet, fish can be eaten regularly without worries. Eating fish comes with its own bag of complications though, like overfishing and the destruction of the oceans. We'll talk about that in another video. A close second is the most popular meat, chicken. It's regarded as the meat with the fewest health risks. The only negative health effect of poultry is a bit controversial: fat. Its high content of saturated fats is associated with a higher cholesterol level and cardiovascular disease. But this idea has also been criticized by a large number of scientists, arguing high cholesterol levels might be inherited and not caused by nutrition. So, in general, if you want meat and are concerned about your health, go for chicken. Things start to get problematic with high intakes of red meat like beef, veal, pork, lamb, horse, and goat. A recently published study recommends, for example, a maximum of 23 grams of red meat per day, which is a very small steak per week. However, large-scale meta-analysis studies have shown that eating 100 grams of red meat every day increases the relative risk of diabetes by 19%, of strokes by 11%, and of colorectal cancer by 17%. This sounds alarming, but before we panic, let's have a look at how these studies were conducted. Because this brings us to the second big problem when trying to answer the question of whether meat is unhealthy or not. Most studies that linked health risks to eating red meat were case control studies, which means taking a group of people with a disease and classifying them by their eating habits. The more red meat they consume, the more likely they were to contract certain diseases. The problem is that it's very hard to eliminate other factors. People who eat less meat tend to live a healthier lifestyle in general. They tend to eat more vegetables and fruit and are less likely to smoke and drink alcohol. Most studies try to eliminate these factors, but it's extremely hard to make definitive statements. Things get worse when we look at processed meat, though. Processing meat means adding certain chemicals by curing, smoking, salting, or fermenting, or in other words, making it delicious. Bacon, ham, salami, sausages, and hot dogs contain chemicals that are harmful for us, like nitrates and nitrites that can damage the DNA in our digestive system and lead to cancer. The WHO reviewed 800 studies over 20 years and concluded that processed meat is strongly linked to an increased risk of colorectal cancer. Each extra 50 grams of processed meat per day increases your relative risk of cancer by 18%. When it comes to cancer risk, processed meat is now in the same category as plutonium, asbestos, and smoking. The WHO highlights that its research is only about the question of whether or not something causes cancer and not to what extent. But processed meat may also significantly increase the chance of suffering from diabetes, strokes, and coronary heart diseases. It also makes a difference what sort of life our meat lived when it was still part of a living being. It's common to feed large amounts of antibiotics to livestock in order to prevent diseases which can spread antibiotic resistance. Combined, a high consumption of both red and processed meat could increase your chance of premature death by up to 29%. This means if your chance of dying is 3% this year, it's now 4%. This might not sound like a lot, but tiny percentages have a huge impact on societies of millions. They also seem harmless until they affect you. To blame meat alone for bad health would be wrong, though. There is no evidence that the very essence of meat has any negative effect beyond its high fat content, and even this point is highly contentious. Just like with many other pleasures in life, sometimes too much of a good thing is harmful. Most public health agencies suggest cutting meat consumption to 500 grams a week, while studies suggest cutting down processed meat as much as possible. So if you feast on meat no more than once or twice a week, you should be good. For most people, this already means a drastic change in their diets, though. The average American consumes around almost 1,600 grams of meat a week. The average German 1,100 grams a week. And many of us eat much, much more. If you're not really sure, make a small note whenever you eat meat for a week or two. You'll be surprised how much it really is. So most people watching this video would benefit from cutting down on meat. Aside from health concerns, there's still the fact that the meat industry is one of the largest contributors to climate change and has reached a scale where it's impossible to deliver millions of tons of meat and still treat animals with dignity. We've already discussed that in detail in another video. All in all, in moderation, meat is not unhealthy, and you don't need to become vegetarian overnight to have a real impact on your health and the planet. But your lifestyle choices do matter, for yourself and for others. The key is being open to trying something new once in a while. Maybe you'll discover your new favorite dish. Until you try, you'll never know what you'll enjoy or what you're capable of. Maybe after watching hours of Crusader videos, you decided you'd like to learn how to animate. Now you might not know this, but most of our team actually has a graphic design background. Learning about design principles first before we got into animation was really key to where we are today. There's a really great new Skillshare class on using Adobe Illustrator, the software we use to create artwork, by graphic designer Aaron Draplin, and we can personally recommend it. It's full of great tips to help understand and simplify a very complicated program. If you want to do more afterwards, we have 3 animation courses of our own on Skillshare too. Skillshare offers over 20 Over the last few years, organic food has spread like wildfire. Despite higher prices, buying organic is turning from an alternative into a moral and social responsibility. Organic food is supposedly healthier, more natural, and more ethical. But what do we even mean when we say organic? There's no global consensus, so different regions have different definitions and rules. In general, organic food is farmed without GMO seeds, synthetic fertilizers, or synthetic pesticides. Instead, organic farmers use more traditional ways of producing food like crop rotation and use organic fertilizers such as compost or manure. While the motivation to buy organic food is clearly noble, is it actually effective or just another costly trend we can skip without feeling guilty? Is organic food healthier? One idea associated with organic crops is that their natural cultivation is supposed to make them more nutritious and healthier. Indeed, several studies found that organic foods contain more antioxidants. Plants produce them as a sort of homemade pesticide. Organic plants seem to have to work a little harder, while regular plants have plenty of help from humans. Antioxidants are believed to have some health benefits, although scientists are still on the fence about them in general. We have no idea if and how exactly they help us, or how much produce you'd have to eat to absorb a certain amount. What about organic being more nutritious? Well, the evidence is mixed. Some studies found that organic food can have slightly higher concentrations of vitamin C and omega-3 fatty acids, while others did not find significant differences. Overall, the mixed evidence suggests that there are only small differences in nutritional value. So, from the science available so far, it doesn't look like organic food has significant health benefits. What we do know is that eating fruit and veggies in general is good for you, and most of us don't do that enough. Eating veggies is more important for your health than how they were produced. Is organic food more natural? People don't only buy organic to get extra vitamins, but to avoid something toxic: artificial pesticides and fertilizers. And indeed, several studies show that there actually is less pesticide residue on organic produce. But here's where things get complicated. Less pesticide does not mean none at all. While pesticides are supposed to be a last resort in organic farming, they're not forbidden. Most organic pesticides are natural toxins like vegetable oils, potash soap, sulfur or copper sulfates, but there are synthetic substances as well. What's the difference between organic and regular pesticides? Not a lot, actually. Organic pesticides are not necessarily safer than conventional ones. Toxic is toxic, no matter if the substance is manufactured or derived from nature. In fact, in the case of copper sulfate, often used on organic apples, the organic pesticide of choice is actually more harmful to humans. The toxicity of any substance depends on its concentration and your exposure to it, not if it's natural or not. There are few recent studies about how our current level of pesticide exposure affects our long-term health. A 2018 study from France associated never eating organic food with a higher risk of certain cancers. The study was criticized a lot, though. The participants reported their dietary habits themselves, while no actual tests of pesticide levels in their bodies were done. Complicating things even more, a Danish study from 2018 found that the danger from pesticides for an adult was similar to drinking a glass of wine every 3 months. The pesticides on your vegetables are nothing to lose sleep over. Despite this, we should continue to demand strict standards for our food. All pesticides are regulated and tested very strictly in the EU and the US. Every year, thousands of food samples are screened for pesticides. The majority of samples have no residues or just a fraction of the tolerance level. Right now, contamination from bacteria and fungi is much more dangerous, and on this front, the risk is the same, be it organic or regular food. Is organic food better for the environment? In 2017, a meta-analysis looked at organic farming in detail and analyzed organic and regular foods from over 700 production sources and their impact on categories like greenhouse gas emissions, energy consumption, and land needs. The result? No production method is clearly better for the environment. Organic systems use less energy than conventional ones, but have similar greenhouse gas emissions. Organic farms use less pesticide, but need much more land to produce the same amount of crop. These mixed results were also confirmed by a report from the Swedish Food Agency. Organic and regular were equal in most regards. The biggest difference was land use, and here conventional farming clearly won, and ecotoxicity, where organic farming has a clear advantage. So according to these results, conventional farming actually has a little bit less impact on the environment compared to organic. The bottom line is, organic food isn't superior to regular produce as far as we know. But organic agriculture also has an impact at a broader level. Demand is rising constantly, and the struggle to supply the market can lead to production methods that are less sustainable in other ways. Spain, for example, grows tons of regular and organic vegetables destined for export in vast greenhouse areas which use a lot of energy and have other environmental impacts, such as significantly higher greenhouse gas emissions. And because growing demand can't be covered by domestic production, the global trade in organic foods is also increasing. As supply chains get more and more complex to make all kinds of foods available in organic quality, ensuring organic quality standards and regulations gets ever more difficult. This has led to incidences of fraud where conventional food was labeled and sold as expensive organic produce. But organic versus conventional food isn't even an objective discussion. Organic is not simply a production method, for many it's an ideology. Buying organic feels right. People want to do the correct thing for the health of their children and the well-being of the planet. But our instinct to think of organic as good and conventional as bad can get in the way of making the most reasonable decision. The solution could be to stop seeing organic and conventional farming as irreconcilable. They both have pros and cons, and the best way to produce healthy food efficiently would be a combination of their best features. And as for your personal shopping, what food you should buy depends on what you expect from it. If you simply want to eat healthily, you should buy more fruit and veggies of any kind, not necessarily organic. If your concern is for the environment, then simply buying organic won't solve this problem for you. The easiest option is to buy local food that's in season. Basically, seasonal is the true organic. To sum up, an organic label is a manufacturing notice, not a security certificate or a silver bullet for your diet. What you eat is much more important than how it's produced. Production is very important for our animations though. We make them with a lot of love and care, and the best thing is, you can learn how to do them. Kurzgesagt joined Skillshare, our favorite online learning community for creators with a 3-part series of 2D animation classes. Skillshare offers more than 25,000 classes on everything from film, writing, design, and technology from skilled experts. The premium membership gives you unlimited access for only $10 a month, but we got you a treat. The first 1,000 people to use the link in the description
Somehow I must find a way to please thee.
Over the last decade, milk has become a bit controversial. Some people say it's a necessary and nutritious food, vital for healthy bones. But others say it can cause cancer and lead to an early death. So, who's right? And why are we drinking it anyway? Milk is the basis of every mammal's diet after birth when our digestive systems are immature and small. Basically, it's power food to kickstart our bodies and help us grow. Milk is rich in fat, vitamins, minerals, and milk sugar, lactose. On top of that, for a while after after birth, it also contains antibodies and proteins that protect us from infections and regulate our immune system. But it's a lot of effort for mothers to produce. Eventually, humans stopped drinking mother's milk and transitioned to the diet of their parents. This is how it's been for thousands of years. Until about 11,000 years ago, when our ancestors settled down in the first agricultural communities. Soon, they domesticated the first dairy animals, goats, sheep, and cattle. They found that dairy animals are able to eat useless and abundant stuff and turn it into nutritious and tasty food. This made a huge difference in terms of survival, especially in hard times. So groups that had milk available had an evolutionary advantage. And through natural selection, it changed the genes of communities who consumed a lot of it. This adaptation has to do with a specialized enzyme, lactase. Babies have a lot of it in their system, so they can break down the milk sugar lactose and digest milk easily. But the older we grow, the fewer lactase enzymes our body produces. Worldwide, about 65% of the population do not have the enzyme after infancy, which means they are not able to digest more than about 150 milliliters each day. This lactose intolerance is not spread evenly around the world, though. In some East Asian communities, for example, it's up to 90%. In Northern Europe and North America, the rates are the lowest overall. There are probably a few reasons for this uneven distribution. The trait was first introduced by random mutation, which happened independently of each other in a few populations. The fact that farming replaced hunting and gathering more and more created natural selection pressure. People who were able to digest lactose had more foods at hand, which was an advantage. The migration of dairy farmers to the north then spread it further, which probably pushed back populations there that didn't have the trait. Okay, but if milk has been a valuable part of our diet for thousands of years, why is it so controversial? There are a number of claims regarding the negative and positive health effects of milk. The negative ones cover a wide variety, from brittle bones to cancer and cardiovascular diseases to intolerance and allergies. So how do they hold up? Some older studies found a connection between milk and a high risk of breast, colon and prostate cancer. But meta-analyses found no impact on your cancer risk. On the contrary, the calcium in milk might even have a protective effect against colon cancer. Although this could be calcium in general, it's not clear milk plays a role in this effect. Only studies on prostate cancer showed an increased risk for people who consumed more than 1.25 liters of milk a day. But again, the association is inconsistent and other studies don't find any effect. We discuss these studies in more detail in our sources document. All in all, the research seems to show that if you drink between 100 to 250 milliliters of milk per day, cancer is not a concern. Similarly, meta-analyses could not find any impact from milk or dairy products on your risk of heart disease, stroke, or your total mortality. Some studies even suggested that high blood pressure might be rarer in people who eat a lot of dairy, although the evidence is not strong enough to claim this with confidence. The case gets more complicated though when we look at bones. A number of studies found neither positive nor negative effects for adults. What most people worry most about, though, are harmful amounts of pesticides, antibiotics, or hormones. There are hormones in milk, but only in very low concentrations. For example, to get the same amount of hormones as from the pill, you'd need to drink about 5,000 liters of milk, and even if you did, most hormones would be destroyed by your digestive system before they could affect you. Which is the reason why so much medication is coated to protect it from our digestion. For pesticides and antibiotics, there are regulations in most parts of the world that only allow completely harmless amounts. Milk that surpasses these thresholds is not allowed to go on the shelf, so there's nothing in particular to worry about. Besides allergies and those suffering from lactose intolerances, the best known negative effects of milk are probably acne and general discomfort after drinking milk or eating dairy products. And here, the effects are very real. For example, skimmed milk has been found to statistically increase the rate of acne by 24%. Allergies against milk products are especially prevalent among children, with 1 in 18 kids in Germany suffering from them. In general, these allergies tend to get better or disappear as they grow older though. Okay, is milk healthy then? Milk, no matter if it comes from mothers, cows, sheep, goats or camels, is a nutrient-dense food. It contains all necessary macronutrients and many micronutrients. Especially in regions where people struggle to get enough calories, milk can contribute to a healthy life and lower child mortality. For those living in the developed world, in general, milk is not harmful if you are not allergic or intolerant to it. Especially for children, it's a good way to get large amounts of calcium, and for vegetarians, it's a good source of vitamin B12 and B vitamins in general. This does not mean there are not other alternatives with the same effect. You do not need to drink milk to be healthy. Milk is also definitely not a substitute for water. Milk is power food, and the additional calories from drinking a lot of it on a regular basis can contribute to being overweight. Especially flavored milk or chocolate milk is more comparable to beverages like lemonade than a healthy snack. And there's another thing to consider. Milk production has a significant impact on the global climate. About 33% of cropland is used to feed grazing animals, including dairy cattle. Even though the carbon footprint of dairy products has declined since 1990, dairy production is still responsible for 3% of all greenhouse gas emissions, even more than all aeroplanes combined. Milk is a huge industry, and sadly most of its production in factory farms causes incredible suffering. Cows are impregnated over and over, separated from their young shortly after birth, and slaughtered once their tortured bodies are not productive anymore. We can't ignore that much of the milk we consume stems from an industry that is basically torture and contributes to climate change. What about plant-based milk? In terms of protein levels and nutritional value, only soy milk can compare to cow milk. The others need to be artificially enriched to reach similar levels of vitamins and calcium. So they can be an alternative to milk. And another option might be available soon. Several startups have created non-animal milk that is nutritionally identical to dairy milk, for example through fermentation by gene-modified bacteria. This lab-grown milk can even be turned into cheese, something that plant-based alternatives struggle with because they lack casein and whey protein, the key ingredients that give dairy its taste and structure. The environmental impact is a different story though. Many milk alternatives use significantly less energy, land and less water to produce, so they have a much lower environmental impact than animal milk. If you want to have the lowest possible negative impact on the planet, the best choice is whatever milk alternative is regional. As with almost any topic, milk is complicated. It's not harmful for the majority of the population, and it's crucial for many people around the world. It's good, nutritious food, but also harmful to the planet and causes a lot of suffering. We need to decide as a society how we want to deal with these facts.
Hinduism, the religion of over 1 billion people, is the world's oldest religion and probably the most confusing one to non-Hindus. Some say it isn't even a religion, more a way of life. Hindus themselves call it the Sanatana Dharma, the eternal tradition. So, what is Hinduism? Does YOLO apply to them? And who is this elephant guy? Well, let's find out. Hinduism is the world's oldest active religion. It's the result of the merging of the ancient Indus Valley civilization and the nomads that came into India around 1500 BC. Some scholars say it could even go back many more thousands of years. But we won't delve too deep into dates, because dates in Hinduism are very, very controversial. But one thing is certain, Hinduism is old, like at least 36 Betty Whites. Hinduism has been around for so long that it and the concept of India itself are inseparable. Hindu and India even come from the same word. Sanskrit was the ancient language of the Hindus, and the Sanskrit name for the Indus River is Sindhu. The ancient Persians who sat across the Indus tended to switch their S's to H's, so Sindhu became Hindu. So the people living across the river became Hindus. The Persians told the Greeks, who dropped that very not Greek-like H, stuck in a very Greek-like I to the end, and boom, India. Hinduism has a long, long history, but today we'll be focusing on just the core beliefs of Hindus because I don't have the willpower to animate a 3-hour-long video. Hindus are a diverse group. Hindus are a diverse group. Some are strict, dedicating their lives to prayer, while others don't believe in any gods but still follow Hindu philosophy. To make things easier to understand, let's break Hinduism down into 7 core beliefs. So, here's my rap about the 7 Hindu beliefs.
You promised you weren't gonna do the rap. Come on, you're better than this, man.
Fine, here's the regular version then. 1. Belief in one universal soul. Hindus believe in a universal soul known as Brahman, a formless, genderless source of all reality. Brahman is the universe and the material that makes up the universe. It's a trippy concept, but think of Brahman as an ocean and everything else as drops propelling out of that ocean. Separate for a time, but still the same thing, if that makes sense. 2. Belief in an immortal individual soul. In Hinduism, souls are known as Atman. Actions of the soul while in a body have effects on that soul's next life. When you die, your soul moves to another new body. This is called transmigration. The kind of body the soul inhabits next is determined by karma. 3. Belief in karma. Karma is action, usually good or bad actions that affect society. For Hindus, karmic actions in the past affect us today, and our actions today affect our soul's future. 4. Belief in moksha. The goal in Hindu life is to somehow get back to Brahman. If a Hindu can do this, they will be freed from the cycle of life and death. This is called moksha. You can achieve moksha by realizing your oneness with Brahman. How you realize this is up to you. For this reason, Hindus pray, "Lead me from the unreal to the real." 5. Belief in the Vedas. The Vedas are Hindu sacred books of knowledge. There are 4 Vedas. Hindus believe that all 4 were divinely revealed to ancient Hindu sages. We'll take a closer look at the Vedas in a while. 6. Belief in cyclical time. For Hindus, there are no beginnings or endings. Time is a series of cycles, each cycle containing 4 ages or yugas. There's the Krita, the Treta, the Dwapara, and the Kali. Added together, the 4 yugas total about 4.32 million years. At the end of each cycle, declining human morality leads to the total destruction of reality. Hindus believe that we are in the 4th and final yug, Kali. 7. Belief in Dharma. Dharma is a difficult word to translate to English. Proper behavior is the best that I could come up with. Dharma maintains balance in the universe. As long as everything in the universe, like animals, plants, and humans, follow their Dharma, then everything will be fine. If they break from the Dharma though, things will be super not fine. Each being has its own dharma. A lion's dharma is to kill and eat antelope, a king's dharma is to rule well, a subscriber's dharma is to smash the like button and ring the notification bell. For humans, their specific dharma is usually based on their age and their caste. An old priest will have a very different dharma than a young merchant, for example. So those are the 7 core beliefs of Hinduism. With them, you can understand the Hindu mindset. Unlike Christianity or Islam, Hinduism is a non-profit organization. There is no Jesus or Muhammad for Hindus. There is no Bible, Quran, or Torah. Instead, they have a bunch, and I mean a bunch, of different sacred texts. The 4 Vedas form the basis of the Hindu faith. So let's take a look at them. 1. The Rig Veda. The Rig Veda is a collection of songs that praise and discuss ideas like truth, reality, and the universe, along with discussions on war, weddings, and rituals. 2. The Yajur Veda. The Yajur Veda covers stuff such as sacrificial rites and rituals. 3. The Sama Veda. Sama literally means sweet song that destroys sorrow. It is mostly songs dedicated to praising gods. It's different than the rest of the Vedas because it's set to music. 4. The Atharva Veda. The Atharva Veda is my favourite one. Do you want to curse your enemies? Or charm that special someone? Maybe learn to invoke rain? Or discover herbal medicine along with tips on warfare? Like how to make poison arrows? Well, this Veda has you covered, along with a bunch of other charms and curses. It even has a curse against cursers. Avoid us, O curse, as a burning fire avoids a lake. Strike him here that curses us, as the lightning of heaven the tree. A link to the Atharva Veda is in the description, just in case you need a spell to get a wife or another to banish pigeons from your presence. It's great. After the Vedas come the Upanishads, which are like a sequel that makes the original make much more sense. They were probably written down between 800 BC and 500 BC, during a time when some Hindus started to question the Vedas. Their ideas became the Upanishads. The Upanishads are books on philosophy, like we would expect from Plato or Aristotle. They're all about questioning, doubt, debate, and finding the answers to life's difficult questions. A theme in the Upanishads is that people are not their minds, or bodies, or egos, but their Atman. Your soul is you. Everything else is unreal and temporary. After the holy texts like the Vedas and the Upanishads are other less divine but still important texts. These include stuff like the Puranas, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. The Puranas are like encyclopedias of Hindu beliefs. There are 18 well-known Puranas. The Puranas cover things from yoga, to army organization, to taxation, to the caste system, to hell, gods, and everything in between. The Bhagavad Gita, Gita for short, is one of Hinduism's most important texts. The Gita takes place on a battlefield where Arjuna, a great warrior, refuses to fight. Lord Krishna steps in to urge Arjuna to fight, and their discussion covers things such as dharma and how to live your best life. Arjuna eventually fought after Lord Krishna taught him the truth about dharma. As a member of the warrior caste, Arjuna's dharma was to fight against evil. The lesson of the Gita is that everyone faces difficult choices, but they must act on them according to their dharma, no matter how unpleasant. Along with all these philosophical texts, Hinduism has 2 action-packed epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. The Ramayana, the earlier of the 2 texts, tells the story of Prince Rama. In the epic, you find out about his 14-year-long exile, the abduction of his wife Sita, his battle with the evil demon Ravana, and his awesome monkey sidekick Hanuman. The second epic, the Mahabharata, is the longest poem in the world, 5 times the length of the Bible and 8 times the length of the Iliad and Odyssey combined. It rivals any soap opera you've ever seen when it comes to drama. Murder, betrayal, love murder, and giant battles. The Mahabharata has it all. The theme running through the Ramayana and the Mahabharata is that dharma must be followed for society to function. In Hinduism, there are 4 goals a person should aim for to have a good life. The first of these is dharma, followed by artha, the pursuit of prosperity and good reputation, kama, pleasure both in body and in mind, and moksha, the release from the cycles of rebirth. Hindus should practice artha and kama with dharma in order to achieve moksha. There are also 6 temptations Hindus should try and avoid. Kama, lust and materialism. This kama is different from the good kama mentioned above, I know. Next is krodha, which is anger, lobha, which is greed, moha, which is unrealistic attachment to things, people and power, mada, which is pride, and matsarya, which is jealousy. By following their dharma and avoiding these 6 temptations, a Hindu can break the cycle of rebirth and have their soul merge back into Brahman. But even though everything comes from Brahman, who is the one real thing in Hinduism, Hindus do, after all, have thousands of gods. So let's take a look at them. First, there's Brahma, the creator. He created everything in the universe, but he is not the universe itself, because that's Brahman. They aren't the same thing. That last letter changes a lot, apparently. He has 4 heads. The heads face each of the 4 directions to represent the 4 Vedas, which he created, and the 4 yugas. He also holds a book, which represents knowledge. Oh, and he rides a giant swan because he's just fancy. His consort is Saraswati, the goddess of learning. Vishnu, the preserver, is the second member of the Hindu trinity. He preserves the world created by Brahma until it is eventually destroyed by Shiva. He world created by Brahma until it is eventually destroyed by Shiva. He holds a discus, which he uses to cut down anyone that tries to mess with his dharma, along with a conch, which symbolizes victory and the 5 elements. Vishnu has many avatars, such as Krishna or Rama, who he uses to defend dharma on earth. Oh, and he rides a giant eagle named Garuda. Vishnu has 2 consorts, the goddess Lakshmi and Bhudevi. Bhudevi is the earth goddess and Lakshmi is the goddess of good fortune and wealth. Next is Shiva the Destroyer, the 3rd member of the Hindu trinity. It's his job to destroy the universe in order to prepare for its renewal at the end of each cycle of time. The most identifiable of his features is his 3rd eye, which he almost always keeps closed. If he does open it and you're in front of him, then you will have your face melted off. When not unmaking existence, Shiva enjoys long walks with his bull named Nandi. At the end of the Kali Yuga, the 4th age of the world, Shiva will perform a dance that destroys the universe. Which is odd because people have told me that my dance moves make them wish the world would end. So me and Shiva have quite a lot in common. Parvati and Sati are Shiva's consorts. Shiva also has 2 sons, Ganesha and Murugan. Ganesha is worshipped as the remover of obstacles, and Murugan is the god of war. Ganesha holds a very special place in the heart of Hindus, due to him being the remover of obstacles. The elephant head is the most obvious clue to identifying him. He was actually born with a human head, but after Shiva cut that one off, he kind of had to make do with an elephant one. If you're Christian or Muslim, you're aware that your religion has a bunch of different denominations, like Catholics or Protestants, Sunni and Shia. Hinduism has these too. Hindus developed 4 major denominations, some of which have their own subdivisions. The Vaishnavas primarily worship Vishnu and Shaivas primarily worship Shiva and his sons. Smartas follow sacred texts like the Puranas, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata rather than the Vedas. They worship 5 gods and goddesses, Ganesha, Durga, Surya, Shiva and a preferred avatar of Vishnu. Finally, Shaktas worship the goddess Devi. Shaktas see Devi as the ultimate and eternal reality, like a feminine Brahman. Even though there are all these variations and more, the core beliefs of Hindus remain mostly the same. Hindus believe that dharma keeps the balance in the universe. If the scales between good and evil start tipping towards evil, then something needs to intervene to fix the universe's dharma. This divine intervention is known as an avatar. The literal meaning of the word avatar is descent. Avatars are gods that descend to Earth to intervene whenever help is needed to restore dharma. For example, when the Earth was dragged underneath the ocean, Vishnu descended to Earth as the avatar Varaha, a boar, and dragged the Earth back out. In other cases, Vishnu was born on Earth as a human avatar like Rama or Krishna, where he spent his avatar's life fixing dharma. So, the caste system. If you only know one thing about Hinduism, this is probably it. People see it as an oppressive system that locks people in place based on their birth. And for a huge part of history, that's what it's been, unfortunately. Let's do a quick explanation of what the caste system is. In Hinduism, there are 4 castes or classes that you can be born into. There's the Brahmin, the priest, the Kshatriyas, the warriors, the Vaishyas, the traders, and the Shudras, the manual laborers. The main basis for the caste system can be found in the Bhagavad Gita and the Rig Veda. Krishna says in the Gita, "I have created a 4-fold system in order to distinguish among one's qualities and functions." The Rig Veda also refers to the 4 castes. It says humans were created from parts of the god Purusha, the Brahman from his face, the Kshatriya from his arms, the Vaishya his thighs, and the Shudra his feet. This system was supposed to assign people functions based on their abilities, not their birth. If someone had the qualities of a Brahman or a Vaishya, they could fill those roles. The Gita didn't restrict movement among castes, and the caste system functioned as intended for a while, until a document known as the Laws of Manu came about around the 5th century BC, popularly referred to as the Manu Smriti. They created hard rules for Hindu life. 2 rules presented in it contributed to the way the caste system turned out. Manu states that the Brahmin were the lords of all castes, and he forbid moving among the castes. The caste you were born into was now the caste you're stuck in. If you give humans a hierarchy, they'll exploit it, and things will go sour pretty quickly. As time passed, Hindus began thinking in terms of upper and lower castes. Soon, cleaning toilets, tanning leather, and dealing with meat products were thought to be impure. The people doing those jobs became untouchables, the lowest of the low, a people without caste. And the rest is history. The modern world has brought many changes though. Now Hindus mix freely while working together in the same businesses, attending the same schools, and generally just living together. But when it comes to marriage, many Hindus still stick to their own caste. But this too is changing, and on Hindu dating websites you can actually see people list a non-preference for caste. It'll say caste no bar. So, those are the basics of Hinduism. It isn't even close to covering everything. One video simply can't do it. Hinduism is too diverse, too deep, and means too many different things to different people. But learning even the basics of this fascinating and ancient religion gives us an insight into the worldview of over 1 billion people, and I hope you enjoyed it. You can find all the sources used in the description below. If you would like to follow your correct dharma, then please subscribe. If you're interested in supporting the channel, there are links to my t-shirt store and Patreon also in the description. Thank you so much for watching. This video is sponsored by CuriosityStream. Get access to Nebula, a video streaming service made by your favorite educational creators when you sign up for CuriosityStream using the link in the description. This is South India, home to the biodiversity hotspots, the Western and Eastern Ghats, the Bengal tiger, the Nilgiri tar, the Indian elephant, and whatever this creature is. Here is also the cradle of Tamil culture. Today there are about 80 million Tamils in the world. That's more than there are French, Colombians, or Kenyans. Most Tamils live in North and East Sri Lanka or in the southern Indian state of Tamil Nadu, literally Tamil country. Tamil Nadu is now a state in modern India, but for thousands of years Tamilakam, or the homeland of the Tamils, was much larger and ruled by independent kingdoms. Tamil culture is the last surviving classical civilization because they've managed to keep their beliefs, culture and language intact for over 2,000 years. But who are the Tamils? What is their story? And what does it have to do with $700 billion golden coconuts? Well, let's find out. The Tamils, maybe more than any other people, are in love with their language. Tamil writing has been dated as far back as the 6th century BCE, from the archaeological site Kairadi in India, and from the 2nd century BCE at Punakari in Sri Lanka, making it one of the oldest datable languages still in use. Tamils often call their language Tamartai, which means the Tamil mother. It's more important to the Tamil identity than land, race, or religion. If you want to have the most intense conversation of your entire life, just go ask a Tamil person anything about the Tamil language. Tamils also take pride in the independent origin of their language. See, you can roughly divide India linguistically in half. North Indians generally speak languages descended from Sanskrit, an Indo-European language. This language family stretches from North India all the way over to Iceland. South Indian languages like Tamil belong to a completely unrelated language family called Dravidian. Unlike Sanskrit, which like Latin is no longer spoken, modern Tamil survives as a living language for millions of speakers. Dravidians do not like it when North India tries to push its culture or language on the south. The earliest clear evidence of Tamil people are urn burials dating from around 1000 BCE at Adich and Alor. Amazingly, they found evidence there of the worship of a god with a trident and a peacock, very like the Hindu Tamils' favourite god today, Murugan. But the Tamils really leap into world history when the Maurya Emperor Ashoka mentions the unconquerable southern Tamil kingdoms in his rock inscriptions made between 273 and 232 BCE. Which is impressive when you consider the fact that the Maurya Empire essentially conquered everything else. This is right around the beginning of a Tamil golden age known as the Sangam period, lasting from the 3rd century BCE to the 3rd century CE. At this time, Tamilakam was ruled by 3 Tamil dynasties, the Solas, the Seras, and the Pandyas. Unfortunately, there were no actual Pandas in the Pandya kingdom. I know. The Tamil kings were immeasurably rich and used their wealth to sponsor century-long poetry slams, called the Sangams at the Pandya capital, Madurai, where male and female poets would show off their works. These poets created thousands of poems, books, and epic stories called Sangam literature. Sangam literature is unique in how it doesn't seem to belong to any single class or religion. It was written by and concerns Hindus, Jains, men, women, farmers, kings, pandas, non-pandas, and everyone in between. One great Sangam poet, Poon Kunkrenar, emphasized the equality of all humans, saying, "I am a citizen of the world, and everyone in the world is related to me." This was quoted by one of India's most beloved presidents, the Tamil Muslim aerospace scientist Abdul Kalam, at the European Parliament in 2007. The Sangam literature tells us about a rich, cosmopolitan and multi-ethnic Tamil-speaking society 2000 years ago, where Hinduism, Jainism and Buddhism all coexisted peacefully, where kings would even invite priests to public debates on their beliefs. Sangam poems describe Madurai as so rich that it had a moat with secret underground passages large enough for elephants. Greek mercenaries guarded its gates, and the scent of perfume could be smelled miles away from the city, where there were folks of every race buying and selling in the bazaars or singing to the music of wandering bands. So how were the Tamils so rich? They were spicy. The ancient world was a bland, flavourless, unseasoned mess. It tasted a lot like English food. This was until the Tamils taught everyone the way of the spice. A 1st century CE Greek manual for sailors, the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, says that the Tamils exported pepper and other spices along with diamonds, woven textiles, pearls, ivory, malabadrum and other luxury items. What's malabadrum? Who cares? It sounds luxurious though. Another major export was cotton and silk clothing woven by women. Indian women would dominate this global trade for the next 2,000 years. Tamils traded so much that Pliny the Elder said India takes 100 million sesterces from our empire per year at a conservative estimate. That's about 10 tons of gold. China had the Silk Road, the Tamils had the Flavor Highway? No, the Spice Boulevard. Whatever. They made themselves the centre of a global trade network that linked Europe, the Middle East, Africa, India, Southeast Asia and China. We've discovered massive hordes of Chinese, Iranian and Roman coins along the ancient Tamil coast. Tamil inscriptions have been found as far apart as Egypt and Thailand. A statue of the Hindu goddess Lakshmi got buried at Pompeii, and Tamil ambassadors met with Augustus Caesar in 20 CE. This trade made Tamil cooking the first international cuisine in the world. The word orange comes from the Tamil naram, ginger comes from Tamil inchivar, and rice in loads of European languages comes from the Tamil arisi. Without the Tamils, Ireland's greatest contribution to world cuisine, the spice bag, would not exist. And honestly, I don't want to live in that kind of world. One Roman cookbook had over 300 recipes using Indian spices, from ostrich curry to tasty peppered brain sausage, or everyone's favourite, another laxative. Link to the cookbook is in the description. in case you need a laxative. Tamils got so rich off of their trade routes that just one temple, the Padmanabhaswamy temple, whose vaults were recently opened, has a treasure worth over $700 billion. This was accumulated over thousands of years from the donations from Tamil dynasties like the Seras, the Pandyas, the Pallavas and the Solas. Some of the things in the temple include this golden Mahavishnu statue, tens of thousands of gold coins, a solid gold throne, golden elephants, a 5-meter long diamond necklace, and my personal favourite, a 30-kilogram solid gold coconut. At what point does that stop being a coconut and start being a bowling ball? There are still unopened vaults in this temple, so we're still unsure of how much it's worth. Tamil merchants, monks and craftspeople worked across Southeast Asia and lived in small communities there. Tamil merchants didn't just trade pepper with Southeast Asia, they traded the spiciest thing of all: ideas. From the 4th century CE on, kingdoms from Thailand to Vietnam to Indonesia were ruled by Hindu kings and wrote using Tamil writing. Modern Khmer, Javanese and Thai scripts all descend from the Tamil Pallava script. The greatest monument to this cultural exchange is the originally Hindu temple of Angkor Wat in Cambodia, the largest religious structure on earth. By the end of the 13th century, we even find the Tamil Hindu temple dedicated to Shiva all the way over in the Chinese port of Qinzhou, where a small Tamil community lived. The wealth and fame of the Tamil lands invited more than just merchants. A small Jewish community could be found in Kochi from the 6th century BCE. More even came as refugees after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE. And according to local tradition, the Jews were followed by St. Thomas, the apostle of Jesus, who landed in India in 52 CE and started converting people to Christianity. From Thomas, India's current Syrian Christian community claims descent. In 629 CE, a mosque was built by Muslim merchants in Muziris, and you can still go visit it today, or a part of it at least, because the Portuguese blew it up in 1504, but it's still cool. You can still see some of it. Okay, so we're going to do a little time jump here. Let's see. Invaded by Buddhist warrior tribes, Jainism and Buddhism take over for a bit, rise of the Pallava dynasty, Hindu revival. Here it is. After the Sangam period, the next great Tamil golden age happened under the Sola dynasty, between the 9th and 13th centuries. Their greatest king, Raja Sola, rose to the throne in 985 CE. He and his son quickly turned his modest kingdom into an empire that conquered most of South India, Sri Lanka and the Maldives. The Sola used their massive navy, the largest in Asia at the time, to control the trade routes between Southeast Asia and China. When the Srivijaya Empire threatened to block Sola access to the Straits of Malacca, the Solas launched massive naval attacks across Indonesia and Malaysia and even kidnapped the Srivijaya king. And no one ever messed with their trade routes ever again. Along with an army containing 60,000 war elephants, the Sola king's personal guard included the Padimuglir, or women bodyguards trained in Tamil martial arts and weapons. There are also mentions of women working as advisors and ambassadors, and using their own money to make large donations to temples. Raja Sola poured his enormous wealth into building massive temples in a style called Dravidian architecture, the most well known of these being the Raja temple in Tanjavur. This 66-meter tall soaring monument to Raja was one of the tallest buildings in the world at the time. Other than Raja temple, other Sola/Dravidian architecture is also breathtaking, like the Iyarateswara temple, the Kankikonta Solapuram temple, and the Champakaresuvara temple. Sola temples also acted as banks. These temples received massive donations from the royals, and then they offered loans from those donations to farmers, villages and merchants. Sola temples became this weird vehicle for redistributing wealth and reinvesting it in arts and local communities, making everyone richer. It's no wonder why when Marco Polo came here in 1273, he called the Sola lands the richest province on earth. Sola power declined in the 12th and 13th centuries. Buddhism and Islam replaced Hinduism in Southeast Asia, and Tamil lands in Kerala drifted away and developed their own language and culture, which resulted in the modern Malayalam language. Okay, so we're going to need to do another time jump. You have Muslim invasions from the north, rise of the Vijayanagara, who built the world's second largest city, arrival of the Portuguese, destruction of the Vijayanagara by Muslim armies, Tamil lands fracture into small states, and here it is. No,
No, it can't be. Not you. Not you again. Tally ho, 'tis a smashing civilization you've got there. 'Twould be a shame if someone were to plunder it. Tamilacum was split into small, competing states in the 17th century, which made it easier for the newly arriving European powers to invade. By the end of the 18th century, most of South India was under British rule. The Tamils resisted the British invasion. One example is that of the Queen of Shivaganga, Velu Nachiyar. To protect her kingdom from invasion, she built an army to resist the British imperialists. This army included a regiment of women soldiers. One of them, Kulili, volunteered to destroy a vital British ammunition depot that was located inside a temple. Kulili and her fellow warriors easily entered the temple as worshippers because the British thought women were harmless. Unable to sneak weapons in, they poured oil over Kulili, who then set herself on fire and leapt into the ammunition depot, blowing it up and securing victory for her queen in the following battles, becoming the first woman martyr in India's long battle for freedom. Despite acts like this, by 1858 the British Crown had seized control of all of India. Famine quickly swept South India between 1876 and 1878, killing 8 million people. With the area devastated by famine, the British could dismantle the over 2,000-year-old Tamil textile industry. As British textile manufacturers couldn't compete with Tamil textiles, so they destroyed all the Indian looms. Then they pushed Tamils out of work as craftspeople and onto tea, sugar, coffee and opium plantations in India, or sent them off across their empire as indentured servants. John Sullivan, a colonial official in southern India, said, under their own dynasties, all the revenue that was collected in the country was spent in the country. Our system acts very much like a sponge, drawing up all the good things from the banks of the Ganges and squeezing them out on the banks of the Thames. India would eventually win its independence from Britain in 1947. In the first 2 decades of Indian independence, language became a battlefield in India. In 1950, Hindi, the most spoken language in India, was selected as the sole official language of the country, with 1965 picked as the year the changeover from English would happen. Speakers of the Dravidian languages in the south didn't like Hindi because it was Sanskrit based, which they considered more alien than English. As 1965 approached, thousands of Tamil student protesters shouted, "Hindi never, English ever," in the streets of Senni. 4 students set themselves on fire as a symbol of non-violent protest. Dravidian political parties made it clear that if Hindi became the official language of India, then Tamil Nadu would secede from India. The protesters won. The Official Languages Act Amendment of 1967 ensured the continued use of English alongside Hindi as the official language of India up until today. Even now in India, Tamil Nadu is famous for its independent streak, love of its culture and language, and for acting as the champion of Dravidian politics against the north. But Tamils don't only live in Tamil Nadu. Just a few kilometers away from there is the island nation known today as Sri Lanka, where Tamils make up 15% of the population. Sri Lanka is home to several ethnic groups. The mostly Buddhist Sinhalese are the majority, and the mostly Hindu Tamils are the second largest group. Both groups have been on the island for over 2,000 years. This island was known as Ceylon when it suffered 3 centuries of colonialism under Portugal, the Netherlands, and then the British Empire took over in 1796. When the British arrived, they were like, how can I make everything worse? Oh, let's introduce inter-ethnic conflict. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, to spur hatred, the British chose Tamils for higher positions than the Sinhalese in the government. Then, in the Sri Lankan highlands, Sinhalese lands were seized by the British and enslaved Tamils from India were settled there as plantation workers. These are Indian Tamils, distinct from the Sri Lankan Tamils who have lived in Sri Lanka for much, much longer. Sri Lankan Tamils live in the north and east. Indian Tamils live in the central highlands, and the Sinhalese live essentially everywhere else. When the British got kicked out of Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, in 1948, the majority Sinhalese took control of the island. Sinhalese nationalism exploded, and soon anti-Tamil massacres swept the island in 1956, 1958 and 1977, which led to the formation of a guerrilla fighting group known as the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, better known as the Tamil Tigers. On the 31st of May 1981, the Sri Lankan police burned the Jaffna Public Library to the ground. home to 97,000 books and containing irreplaceable artifacts of Tamil history. Seeing the fire, one Tamil refugee said, "It was as if my entire biography, my history and the history of the Tamils had been destroyed, wiped from the face of the earth as if we did not exist." On July 23, 1983, the Tamil Tigers ambushed and killed 15 Sri Lankan soldiers, causing another anti-Tamil massacre to sweep the country in an event known as Black July. The Sri Lankan Civil War had begun. The Tamil Tigers were fighting for an independent Tamil nation in the Tamil parts of the island. As the war dragged on over decades, the Tamils became infamous for inventing the explosive suicide vest and for carrying out a suicide bombing campaign across Sri Lanka. The Sri Lankan army retaliated with brutal attacks against the Tamil Tigers, which mostly resulted in the deaths and displacement of tens of thousands of innocent Tamil civilians. The Sri Lankan state is still undergoing investigations for committing a genocide against the Tamils. This bloody war dragged on for 26 years, until the 18th of May 2009, when the leader of the Tamil Tigers, V. Pirapakaran, was killed and the Tigers surrendered. The war took the lives of over 100,000 people, with 40,000 Tamil civilians being killed in the final few months of the war. These are rough estimates because a proper investigation hasn't been done. The war caused a mass exodus of Sri Lankan Tamil refugees to India, Australia, Europe and North America. Today around 8 million Tamils live outside of India and Sri Lanka. From the 19th century onwards, they went as indentured labourers across the British Empire, especially to Malaysia, Singapore, South Africa, Fiji, Mauritius and the Caribbean, where many have kept their Tamil identities. Tamil is actually an official language in Singapore and Malaysia. Well, I think now it's time to take a look at Tamil culture. Religion. Today about 88% of the Tamil population of Tamil Nadu are Hindus, 6% are Christians, 5.8% are Muslims, and Jains, Buddhists and Sikhs make up the rest. The most important Tamil festival is Thai Pongal, a harvest festival dedicated to the Hindu sun god Surya that usually occurs on the 14th of January. This festival is celebrated by all Tamils regardless of religion though. Pongal means to boil or overflow and refers to the traditional dish of new harvest rice boiled in milk with raw sugar. Pongal celebrations include decorating cows, ritual bathing, parades, prayers, dances, creating art, and getting together with friends and family and exchanging gifts. During Pongal in Tamil Nadu, you might also see a Jallikutta. In this over 2,000-year-old sport, an Indian bull is released into a crowd of people, and men attempt to grab the hump on the bull's back with both arms and hang onto it for as long as possible, attempting to bring the bull to a full stop, thus taming the bull. If they do so, they get a prize. If no one tames the bull, the owner of the bull gets a prize. There have been many attempts to ban this sport in recent years, which has caused massive popular backlash. Another interesting Tamil holiday is a May festival for the god Aravan, who is worshipped by transgender people called Terunar in Tamil. At this annual festival at Kovakam, you'll see ceremonial marriages between festival goers and the god Aravan, along with beauty pageants and dances hosted with the support of the Tamil Nadu government. In 2008, Tamil Nadu became the first state in India to allow people to legally identify as a third gender. Arts. Tanjore paintings and Sola bronzes are some of the Tamils' greatest contributions to world art. But one of the more humble yet distinct features of Tamil art is the kolam, which decorates the front of almost every Tamil home. These are geometrical and floral designs made of rice flour. Each day the kolam is crafted by women and then erased the next morning to make room for a new one. Today in Tamil Nadu, huts to 5-star hotels will all have a kolam. One of the most treasured pieces of Tamil literature is the Tirukkural by Tiruvulluvar, which has its origins in the Sangam period but was finalised a few centuries after. This is a masterpiece in ethics and living well. The Tirukkural is made up of 3 books of wise sayings on virtue, wealth and love, all delivered in quick 2-line poems. For example, the greatest virtue of all is non-killing. Truthfulness cometh only next. It also just stops midway and talks about how to build good forts, and I'm always down for some fort talk. Charity and kindness are also key aspects, and it emphasises non-violence and vegetarianism. Avoidance of killing and eating the meat of even one animal is more meritorious than 1,000 sacrifices. The Tirukural is vital to Tamil culture. It pops up in songs, films, and books. Every bus in Tamil Nadu is legally obligated to have a verse from the Tirukural on it. One of the Tamil's most famous dances is Paratanateum. This dance tells a story through complicated mudras, or hand gestures, facial expressions, and body posture. It also just looks incredible. Foods include the light and fluffy idli, the fried and spicy vadai, the crispy dosa, and the delicious fried banana bonda. And no or in Sri Lanka, coconut sambal. Tamils also love their coffee, which they brew in this unique South Indian device. Cinema. Tamil people are passionate about cinema. Based in the Kodobakam neighbourhood in Sena, the Tamil film industry, or Kollywood, is the second largest film industry in India. Mani Ratnam's gangster epic Nayakam was included in Time magazine's 100 best movies of all time list. I actually watched a movie with one of Tamil cinema's superstars, Rajinikanth, where this happens, and it was an absolutely amazing few hours. Tamil cinema has even bled into Tamil politics. Amazing few hours. Tamil cinema has even bled into Tamil politics. 3 chief ministers of the Tamil Nadu state have risen out of Tamil cinema. Tamil cinema acts as a way for Tamils to preserve their independent and original culture by producing films in the Tamil language based on Tamil ideas and culture. I wish there was something like that for YouTubers, so they could create independent and high quality educational content for people that just love learning. Oh wait! Cogito and a bunch of our creator friends got together and made our own platform called Nebula, and we're excited to be partnering with CuriosityStream. Nebula is a place where you can watch some of the best educational content ad-free, uncensored, and earlier than YouTube. This video was up on Nebula days ago, and there creators can also experiment with all kinds of new and exclusive content. This channel has exclusive content up on Nebula, and by supporting Nebula, you'll be providing a budget for creators to put out Nebula originals that would never make it on YouTube. Take for example Tom Scott's new game show Money, where he turns some of your favourite creators against each other for fun and profit. Or Real Engineering's Nebula original, The Logistics of D-Day. It's an incredible World War II docu-series that dives deep into a topic that YouTube's algorithm would bury. There are many, many more Nebula originals, all funded by and created for people like you, people that enjoy original, independent and smart content. And now Nebula even has original podcasts. But what does CuriosityStream have to do with this? Well, CuriosityStream is the best place to find world-class documentaries online, so we've teamed up and created a deal. If you follow the link in the description and sign up for CuriosityStream's annual subscription, you'll get access not only to CuriosityStream's entire catalogue of thousands of documentaries, but you'll also get access to Nebula for free. And that's not a trial or anything like that. As long as you're signed up to CuriosityStream, you'll get Nebula. And right now, for a limited time, CuriosityStream is offering Cogito viewers a 41% discount on their annual subscription. That's less than $15 a year for CuriosityStream and Nebula. I just finished watching their new documentary Treasures of the Earth, which is about indigenous peoples around the world. So if you like this video, you'll love that documentary. Unlike us, they actually have a budget to go and fly around the world and film these people, rather than drawing cute, chunky versions of them like we do. So click the link below to get 41% off the annual CuriosityStream subscription along with free access to Nebula, or you can just go to curiositystream.com/Cogito. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. What people would you like us to cover next? You can find all the sources used in the description. If you're interested in supporting this channel, you can find our Patreon and merch store also linked down below. Our patrons get early access to all of our videos and a peek behind the scenes, along with knowing that these videos would not be possible without them. So thank you so much for watching, and Poitu Varen. This video is sponsored by CuriosityStream. Get access
सुनो इधर ध्यान दो, इम्पोर्टेंट बात करनी है तुम्हारे साथ। NRA CET आने वाला है।
स्वामी विवेकानंद सिर्फ एक मंक नहीं, एक मैन ऑफ साइंस थे। अगर मैं ये कहूं तो क्या आप विश्वास करेंगे? क्या आप यकीन करेंगे कि निकोला टेस्ला और जमशेदजी टाटा जैसे लेजेंड्स भी स्वामी जी से साइंस की बातें करते थे? आज कई लोग जब स्वामी ये शब्द सुनते हैं तो उनके मन में एक ढोंगी बाबा की पिक्चर आ जाती है। कोई स्कैम आता है, कोई मोलेस्टेशन केस आता है, लेकिन करते थे। आज कई लोग जब स्वामी ये शब्द सुनते हैं तो उनके ढोंगी बाबा की पिक्चर आ जाती है। कोई स्कैम आता है, कोई मोलेस्टेशन केस आता है, लेकिन अगर कोई थे जिन्होंने कहा कि साइंस और स्पिरिचुअलिटी एक ही कॉइन के दो साइड है, तो वो है स्वामी विवेकानंद।
आज 12 जनवरी उनका बर्थ।
लेकिन क्यों? एक साइंस का प्रवक्ता और एक यूथ आइकन भी बनाता है।
इन द नेक्स्ट फ्यू मिनट्स हम स्वामी विवेकानंद जी की एक प्रैक्टिकल अप्रोच के बारे में बात करने वाले हैं, जिसने टेस्ला को भी हेल्प की।
प्लीज इस वीडियो को एंड तक देखिए और अगर आपको इस वीडियो से वैल्यू मिलती है तो इस मैसेज को और लोगों तक पहुंचाने में हमारी हेल्प कीजिए।
स्वामी विवेकानंद जैसे भारत के असली आइकॉन्स की नॉलेज एक आसान भाषा में नए जनरेशन तक पहुंचाना हमारा मिशन है। हमें सपोर्ट करने के लिए हमारे YouTube चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कीजिए और इस बेल आइकॉन को प्रेस कीजिए।
लेकिन स्वामी जी डिफरेंट क्यों?
बचपन में स्वामी जी ना कि मैथ्स में कंफर्टेबल थे और ना कि रिलीजन में, लेकिन वो साइंस और स्पिरिचुअलिटी के भक्त थे।
जब वो अपने गुरु श्री रामकृष्ण जी से मिले तब उन्होंने भारत के वैदिक सीक्रेट्स के बारे में जाना। उन्हें ये रियलाइज हुआ कि वेदों में कई ऐसे राज हैं जो दुनिया तक पहुंचने की जरूरत है।
बात है 19th सेंचुरी के आखिरी 10 सालों की, जब भारत की आइडेंटिटी पूरी दुनिया में सिर्फ एक ब्रिटिश कॉलोनी की हो गई थी।
भारत एक नॉलेज की गोल्ड माइन नहीं, एक गुलामों की फैक्ट्री है, ऐसा लोग समझते थे।
लेकिन स्वामी जी ने इसे बदलना चाहा और 1893 में शिकागो में होने वाला पार्लियामेंट ऑफ रिलीजन्स इस काम के लिए बेस्ट प्लेटफॉर्म था।
जब आप एक स्ट्रॉन्ग सेंस ऑफ नेशनलिज्म को अनलिमिटेड ज्ञान ऑफ स्पिरिचुअलिटी में मिलाते हैं तो एक डेडली कॉम्बिनेशन बनता है, और वो है स्वामी विवेकानंद। जहां सारे लोग अपना खुद का रिलीजन कैसे बेहतर है ये प्रूव करने में लगे थे, स्वामी जी ने एक दूसरा अप्रोच अपनाया। उन्होंने कहा, जैसे अलग अलग नदियां अलग अलग राहें लेती हैं लेकिन अंत में सागर में जा मिलती है, वैसे ही हम हैं। और हमारे रास्ते जरूर अलग होंगे लेकिन हमारा लक्ष्य एक है। जहां डार्विन की थ्योरी ऑफ एवोल्यूशन सच है या नहीं, इस पर दुनिया में डिबेट हो रही थी, रेसिज्म और स्लेवरी पीक पर थी, वहां एक ग्लोबल प्लेटफॉर्म पर यह कहना कि हम सबका सोर्स और डेस्टिनेशन एक ही है, एक रेवोल्यूशन से कम नहीं था।
इन्हीं रेवोल्यूशनरी थॉट्स की वजह से स्वामी विवेकानंद became one of the most rational thinkers the world has ever seen।
और मजे की बात तो यह है कि दूसरे फील्ड के कई ऐसे ही रेवोल्यूशनरीज उनके दोस्त बने, जैसे कि टेस्ला। अक्सर हमें सिखाया जाता है कि इलेक्ट्रिसिटी का इन्वेंशन एडिसन ने किया, लेकिन सच तो यह है कि एडिसन एक एक्सीलेंट बिजनेसमैन थे। वो पेटेंट्स अक्वायर करने में और उन्हें मार्केट करने में एक जीनियस थे, लेकिन एक सुपीरियर इन्वेंटर तो टेस्ला थे। उनकी टेक्नोलॉजी एडिसन की टेक्नोलॉजी से कई स्टेप्स आगे थी।
निकोला टेस्ला की डिस्कवरीज आज हम जो भी गैजेट्स यूज करते हैं उनमें से 80% गैजेट्स में यूज होती हैं।
निकोला टेस्ला म्यूजियम के आर्काइव्स में लिखा गया है कि निकोला टेस्ला का कई सारा रिसर्च वैदिक कॉन्सेप्ट्स पर बेस्ड था। उनके बुक मैन्स ग्रेटेस्ट अचीवमेंट में आकाश और प्राण जैसे संस्कृत शब्द।
जब टेस्ला स्वामी जी से मिले तब टेस्ला उनसे उम्र में बड़े थे और ऑलरेडी एक एस्टैब्लिश्ड साइंटिस्ट थे।
और फिर टेस्ला ने संस्कृत और हमारे एंशिएंट वेदों के बारे में स्वामी जी से बहुत कुछ सीखा। स्वामी जी का विश्वास था कि हमारे आसपास जो सारी फोर्सेस हैं वो सारी एक यूनिफाइड सिंगल फोर्स का हिस्सा है। और फिर धीरे धीरे इस स्पिरिचुअल सी बात को कई साइंटिस्ट ने इक्वेशंस के जरिए प्रूव कर दिया। 1895 में स्वामी जी और टेस्ला के बीच में एक काफी इंटरेस्टिंग डिबेट हुई। स्वामी जी का मानना था कि मैटर और एनर्जी एक ही है और इस आइडिया पर टेस्ला ने काम करना चाहा। अनफॉर्चुनेटली टेस्ला अपना रिसर्च कंप्लीट नहीं कर पाए, लेकिन ऐसा ही एक रिसर्च आने वाले टाइम में एक दूसरे महान साइंटिस्ट ने कंप्लीट किया और हमें दुनिया का सबसे फेमस इक्वेशन मिला, E = mc²। इनफैक्ट महाभारत के ब्रह्मास्त्र से इंस्पायर होकर टेस्ला भी ऐसा ही एक अस्त्र बनाना चाहते थे, लेकिन उनकी डेथ के बाद यूएस गवर्नमेंट ने इस रिसर्च का क्या किया किसी को नहीं पता। और सिर्फ टेस्ला ही नहीं।
Did you know, जब जमशेदजी टाटा भारत में स्टील इंडस्ट्री लाकर क्रांति शुरू कर रहे थे तब स्वामी जी उनसे मिले। स्वामी जी ने कहा था कि जब भारत एक साइंटिफिक मेंटालिटी और साइंस एजुकेशन अपनाएगा तभी आगे बढ़ पाएगा।
इतना ही नहीं, फादर ऑफ अमेरिकन साइकोलॉजी विलियम जेम्स, जर्मन साइंटिस्ट हर्मन वॉन हेल्महोल्ट्ज और 5G टेक्नोलॉजी के फादर माने जाने वाले भारत के साइंटिस्ट जेसी बोस ने भी विवेकानंद जी को अपना गाइड माना। और ये सब इसीलिए पॉसिबल हुआ क्योंकि स्वामी जी सच की खोज में विश्वास रखते थे, फिर जरिया कोई भी हो।
Science is a search for truth in the external world and spirituality is a search for truth in the internal world.
इसीलिए जहां उन्होंने मॉडर्न वर्ल्ड को हमारे वेदों के बारे में सिखाया, वैसे ही भारत के गांवों में अपने शिष्यों के जरिए हाथ में एक राउंड ग्लोब और लैंटर्न लेकर मॉडर्न साइंस के बारे में भी सिखाया। और इसी बैलेंस की वजह से स्वामी जी आज भी एक यूथ आइकन, क्योंकि वो जानते थे कि कल की दुनिया सिर्फ मॉडर्न साइंस या एंशिएंट विजडम दोनों में से एक के फाउंडेशन पे खड़ी नहीं हो सकती। साइंस और स्पिरिचुअलिटी दोनों एक दूसरे को कॉन्ट्राडिक्ट करने के लिए नहीं, एक दूसरे को कॉम्प्लीमेंट करने के लिए। काश आज के लीडर्स भी जो खुद को रिलीजियस लीडर्स मानते हैं इतने ही ओपन माइंडेड होते।
अगर आप चाहते हैं कि स्वामी विवेकानंद जी की ये साइड लोगों तक पहुंचे तो इस वीडियो को आगे शेयर कीजिए,
क्योंकि आज की ट्रेजेडी यही है कि जहां वेस्टर्न लोग हमारे कल्चर के बारे में जानने के लिए और ज्यादा उत्सुक हैं,
वही हमारे लोग हमारे कल्चर से, जो हमारे रूट्स हैं, उनसे दूर भाग रहे हैं।
सी मैं ये बिल्कुल नहीं कहता कि हमारा कल्चर, हमारा इतिहास बाकी के कल्चर से एक स्टेप आगे है, 100% परफेक्ट है, बिल्कुल नहीं। लेकिन ये जरूर कहता हूं कि साइंस इज अबाउट एडमिटिंग व्हाट वी डोंट नो। इसीलिए इस साल स्वामी विवेकानंद जी से इंस्पायर होकर महीने में एटलीस्ट एक बार एक वीडियो के थ्रू भारत के एंशिएंट विजडम को एक रेलेवेंट स्वरूप में आपके सामने लाने की हम कोशिश करेंगे। रीजन और रिलीजन दोनों से डेटा लेंगे, इंफॉर्मेशन की एक रेसिपी बनाएंगे और नॉलेज की एक डिश आपके सामने लाएंगे।
Sparkle cleans everyday messes, and it won't clean out your piggy bank. Sorry about the noise.
हम हमारे देश में महाभारत रामायण स्कूल में क्यों नहीं पढ़ाते? कुछ लोगों को लगता है कि ये रिलीजियस टेक्स्ट है, लेकिन एक्चुअली ये हमारी हिस्ट्री का हिस्सा है। बात रिलीजन की नहीं है, बात कहानियों की है, क्योंकि बच्चे बूढ़े दोनों कहानियों से सीखते हैं।
इस साल जनवरी में हमने आपको एक प्रॉमिस किया था कि हम हर महीने एटलीस्ट एक वीडियो जरूर बनाएंगे जिसमें हम अपनी हिस्ट्री को एक मॉडर्न और प्रैक्टिकल तरीके से आपके सामने लाएंगे। वी हैव ऑलरेडी मेड अ वीडियो ऑन रामायण। आज हम महाभारत के टॉप 3 लेसन्स आपके सामने लाने वाले हैं जो आज की मॉडर्न दुनिया में भी रेलेवेंट है।
अगर आपको ये वीडियो अच्छा लगता है तो इस नॉलेज को और लोगों तक पहुंचाने में हमारी हेल्प कीजिए।
भारत के लिए इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक्स को एक शॉर्ट और आसान भाषा में आपके सामने लाना हमारा मिशन है। हमें सपोर्ट करने के लिए हमारे YouTube चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कीजिए और इस बेल आइकॉन को प्रेस कीजिए।
लेसन 1, The real enemy of strength is pride। आज का इंसान शक्तिशाली तो है, पृथ्वी से छलांग लगाकर चांद और मंगल तक पहुंच सकता है, एक क्लिक से दुनिया भर का नॉलेज पा सकता है, समंदर की गहराइयों से ऑयल निकाल सकता है, लेकिन फिर भी प्रकृति के आगे इंसान को झुकना ही पड़ता है। भीम बलवान थे, किसी से डरते नहीं थे, लेकिन वनवास में उनके सामने एक वानर आया।
वानर काफी कमजोर था, वो उठ नहीं पा रहा था। भीम ने वानर को अपनी पूंछ उठाने के लिए कहा था। पूंछ उनके रास्ते में आ रही थी। वानर ने कहा, मैं तो कमजोर हूँ, आप ही मेरी पूंछ उठाइए और चले जाइए।
भीम को गुस्सा आया, उन्होंने पैरों से ही पूंछ हटाने की कोशिश की, लेकिन पूंछ नहीं हिली। अपनी गदा साइड में रखकर पूंछ उठाने की कोशिश की, लेकिन पूंछ नहीं हिली। अपनी पूरी ताकत लगाई, लेकिन पूंछ बिल्कुल नहीं हिली। भीम ने हाथ जोड़े, वो जान गए थे कि ये साधारण वानर नहीं है, ये वायुपुत्र हनुमान। हनुमान जी ने अपना असली रूप धारण किया और भीम से कहा, शक्तिशाली तो बहुत लोग होते हैं, कुछ लोगों की शक्ति उनकी बॉडी में होती है, कुछ लोगों की उनके वेल्थ में और कुछ लोगों की उनके नॉलेज में। लेकिन जिस मोमेंट हमें उस शक्ति पर गर्व होने लगता है, उसी मोमेंट हमारी शक्ति हमारी कमजोरी बन जाती है। कुछ काम हाथ उठाकर नहीं, हाथ जोड़कर करने पड़ते हैं और इसमें कोई शर्म नहीं। पूंछ तो बस एक बहाना था, भीम के रास्ते का असली हर्डल उनका घमंड था। डोंट यू थिंक हम हमारा ईगो, हमारा घमंड, हमारा प्राइड अगर साइड में रख देंगे तो बहुत आगे बढ़ पाएंगे? आई थिंक ये लेसन आज सबसे ज्यादा रेलेवेंट। लेसन 2, हु इज अ रियल फ्रेंड। हम एक्सपेक्ट करते हैं कि हमारा दोस्त हर बात में हमारा साथ दे, हमारी गलतियां छुपाने में हमारी हेल्प करे।
कर्ण और दुर्योधन भी दोस्त थे।
जब कर्ण के खुद के भाइयों ने उसका मजाक उड़ाया, बात बात पर इंसल्ट किया, तब दुर्योधन ने उसे गले लगाए, उसे अपने साइड में बिठाकर रिस्पेक्ट दी।
कर्ण had vowed that he'll be loyal to Duryodhan no matter what।
कर्ण पूरे महाभारत में काफी इंटरेस्टिंग कैरेक्टर है, ग्रे कैरेक्टर है। कई बातें हैं जो हम कर्ण से सीख सकते हैं। हम सब किसी ना किसी लेवल पर कर्ण से कनेक्ट जरूर करते हैं, क्योंकि उसके साथ बार बार नाइंसाफी होती है।
अब कर्ण की गलती कहाँ हुई?
जब दुर्योधन ने पांडवों का महल जलाया, तब कर्ण को उसे रोकना चाहिए था, लेकिन कर्ण ने उसका साथ दिया।
जब दुर्योधन ने भरी सभा में द्रौपदी वस्त्रहरण किया, तब कर्ण को उसे रोकना चाहिए था, लेकिन कर्ण ने उसका साथ दिया।
जब दुर्योधन सत्ता के लालच में अपने भाइयों को मारने चला था, तब कर्ण को उसे रोकना चाहिए था, लेकिन कर्ण ने उसका साथ दिया।
कर्ण ने एंड तक अपनी लॉयल्टी का वचन तो निभाया, लेकिन सोचने वाली बात यह है कि उससे दुर्योधन का फायदा हुआ या नुकसान।
कर्ण एज अ फ्रेंड फेल हो गया, एक बार नहीं बार बार फेल हो गया, क्योंकि उसने दुर्योधन को आईना नहीं दिया। डोंट यू थिंक हमारे असली दोस्त वही होते हैं जो हमें गलत रास्ते पर जाने से रोकते हैं?
Loyalty to your friends is not bad, but unquestioning loyalty can be fatal.
आई थिंक ये लेसन आज सबसे ज्यादा रेलेवेंट। लेसन 3, असली हीरो कौन? परफेक्ट तो पांडव भी नहीं थे, कौरव भी नहीं थे। पांडवों में भी कमियां थी और कौरवों में भी गुण थे, लेकिन फिर भी अगर कौरव जीते और पांडव हारते तो कुछ ठीक नहीं लगता, राइट? लगता कि कहानी अधूरी है। बट व्हाई डू वी वांट पांडव्स टू विन? कौरवों और पांडवों में एक डिफरेंस जरूर था। पांडवों ने अपनी जर्नी में गलतियों का सामना किया, उन्हें एक्सेप्ट किया, कभी उनसे हारे, कभी उनसे जीते, लेकिन कभी उनसे भागे नहीं। ऑन द अदर हैंड कौरव अपनी कंडीशंस के लिए हमेशा दूसरों को ब्लेम करते रहे। उन्होंने कभी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी नहीं ली, वो अपने विक्टिमहुड के ही विक्टिम बन गए। सतयुग में देव और असुर अलग अलग दुनिया में रहते थे। त्रेता युग में देव और असुर एक ही दुनिया में रहने लगे। द्वापर युग में देव और असुर एक ही परिवार में रहने लगे और आज कलयुग में देव और असुर एक ही इंसान में रहते हैं। महाभारत में जिस ग्रेट वॉर का मेंशन है वो और कहीं नहीं, हमारे ही मन में चलने वाली वॉर। सोचिए, हम ही तो हैं जो अर्जुन की तरह फोकस्ड होते हैं, हम ही तो हैं जो दुर्योधन की तरह दूसरों से जलते हैं, हम ही तो हैं जो कृष्ण की तरह किसी की मदद कर सकते हैं, और हम ही तो हैं जो शकुनी की तरह किसी का फायदा उठा सकते हैं।
महाभारत अल्टीमेटली हम सबको यही बताना चाहता है कि हमारे अंदर 100 दोष हो सकते हैं, लेकिन 5 गुणों से हम उन पर विजय पा सकते हैं।
और आई थिंक ये लेसन कल भी रेलेवेंट था, आज भी रेलेवेंट है और हमेशा रेलेवेंट होगा। आई नो, महाभारत से 3000 लेसन सीखने जैसे, इसीलिए ये वीडियो एक सीरीज का पार्ट 1। अगर आप पार्ट 2, 3, 4 देखना चाहते हैं तो इस वीडियो को लाइक कीजिए। 2 लाख लाइक्स का टारगेट रखें और हमें कमेंट्स में बताइए कि पार्ट 2 में आप कौन सी कहानियां सुनना चाहते हैं। हमें भी तो पता चले कि कितने लोग एंड तक देख रहे हैं, कितने लोगों को नॉलेज में एक्चुअली इंटरेस्ट है, और हमारा ये प्रैक्टिकल नॉलेज लोगों तक पहुंचाने का एक्सपेरिमेंट कितना सक्सेसफुल।
भारत के एपिक्स रामायण और महाभारत रीडर्स को ट्रेन करने के लिए बने हैं। महाभारत एटलीस्ट 3000 सालों से हमें एजुकेट करते आया है, पहले ओरल कल्चर से और फिर रिटन फॉर्म में भी। मौर्य साम्राज्य ने 2300 साल पहले महाभारत के रिटन रिकॉर्ड्स मेंटेन किए,
क्योंकि वो जानते थे कि महाभारत पंचम वेद है, एक ऐसा वेद जो बाकी के चारों वेदों का नॉलेज एक आसान भाषा में, स्टोरी फॉर्मेट में लोगों तक पहुंचा सकता है। हजारों साल पहले जब इंटरनेट नहीं था, प्रिंटिंग प्रेस नहीं थी, तब हम ये बात जानते थे। आज तो हमारे पास सारे टूल्स हैं नॉलेज को पास ऑन करने के लिए, तो हम क्यों इन बातों को हमारी नई जनरेशन से छुपाते हैं?
हमें आपको पूछना है, ये सारा नॉलेज, ये सारी बातें हमें स्कूल्स में सिखानी चाहिए या फिर अपने बच्चों से छुपानी चाहिए? आप हमें बताइए।
बुरा लगता है जब हमारे देश में कुछ लोग महाभारत को डिसरिस्पेक्ट करते हैं। महाभारत के लिए नहीं, उनके लिए और उनके लिमिटेड नॉलेज के लिए। उनका नाम लेने से या उन्हें 2 मिनट की पब्लिसिटी देने से हमें क्या फर्क पड़ता? क्योंकि अगर हमारा इतिहास इतना कमजोर होता कि किसी के 4 शब्दों से डगमगा जाए तो वो हजारों साल, लाखों इन्वेजन्स के बाद सरवाइव ही नहीं कर पाता। हमारा एंशिएंट नॉलेज सदियों से हमें अंधेरे से उगते सूरज की ओर गाइड करता आया है। कुछ उल्लू होते हैं जिन्हें अंधेरे में रहना पसंद है, लेकिन एटलीस्ट आपको हमारे इतिहास की रोशनी दिखाने से मुझे फर्क पड़ता है। हे एस्टीम, हम हमेशा सोचते थे कि मीडिया भारत के बारे में इतनी नेगेटिव क्यों, तो हमने एक पॉजिटिव